It was an ordinary clear day at one of the city's construction sites, and work was in full swing. One of the workers, a young dark-haired man named Tony, received a message on his phone. It said that he had failed the selection process again at one of the companies, and it turned out that he had the expertise in the right area, but they had restrictions on hiring employees, so he couldn't pass the interview. At that moment, someone called out to Tony, forcing him to close his phone. It turned out it was his partner, John, who asked if Tony was playing mobile games again instead of working. Tony quickly hid his phone and assumed a harmless appearance, saying that he had already finished his work and now had nothing to do. John asked him incredulously why a guy who had only been on the team for a year was doing so well, but she didn't tell him that she had been doing this since he graduated from high school, which he had told him when they were sitting at the bar. He chuckled, saying that John's memory was knocked out of him every time he drank. The man was not very happy with this answer. Then Tony climbed up on a stepladder and started painting the walls, saying that John could rest and have a smoke while he finished everything. At that moment, Tony's body was pierced by a terrible, strange sensation. John noticed it and asked what happened to him. Tony immediately grabbed his back but said that he was fine, but despite this, his whole body continued to shake. He thought to himself that his painkillers must have worn off. As it turned out, due to the hard work, his back began to hurt very badly. The pain became more frequent after he lifted the panel 6 months ago. After some time, evening came, the men left the construction site, and at that moment, one of the elders, Stephen, approached them. He asked why Tony was doing all the work here. He turned to John. The man was extremely unhappy that his partner, Tony, was doing all the work for him. Then John asked his boss why he liked Tony so much. The man said that he is the only one who tries to get everything done on time, which is why he likes him, while John does not listen to him at all. Then the boss approached Tony and asked how his back was. The guy said that he was fine and thanked the man for his concern. Stephen asked if he was taking on too much responsibility, to which Tony hesitated a little and said that apparently he did take on too much work. He then asked him if he wanted to go for a drink with them, but the guy replied that he needed to go to the hospital because his painkillers had run out. So Stephen said goodbye to him and wished him a good journey. Soon after, Tony got into a taxi and went about his business. While he was driving in the car, he thought about his life. He thought that he would not be able to work until he took the pills. He would like to find a less stressful position where he could feel physically good. However, even after a bunch of applications, not a single company accepted it. Sometime later, Tony arrived at the hospital, where he continued to think about why he was so unlucky. He thought about the fact that he was not being accepted because he was only applying for administrative positions. He was afraid that because of his back, he would no longer be able to bear heavy loads. Soon, the doctor, whose name was Hank, took him in. As soon as he touched his back, Tony yelped in pain and tears poured out of his eyes. The man said that the intervertebral disc between the 4th and 5th vertebrae had worn out, and Tony could no longer lift heavy objects. The guy did not object, saying that without work he would simply die of hunger, but the doctor said that he had already told him about this many times. He asked if Tony didn't want to repeat his father's fate. Then the boy's eyes were again filled with terrible memories. 13 years ago, during a change of settings, his father died in an accident. That day, his father was working at a height and suddenly fell. The company shifted the blame to the contractor, and its president suddenly disappeared. Thanks to lawyers, they were able to receive compensation of 25 million won, and their family has been in a state of survival ever since. Stephen asked him what he would do if his mother found out about everything, and asked Tony to think again, because painkillers are temporary, and his spine is not eternal. The young man said that it was very difficult for him to find a position with such high pay. The doctor said that in that case, he had nothing more to add. Then he suddenly shouted at him, saying that if he was going to continue like this, he might as well not come to him anymore. He asked the nurse to take him out and said that with this attitude, he was not going to see him in his office anymore. When Tony left the office, Hank picked up his phone and opened the banking app, then transferred 2 million won to a woman named Hannah. Then he leaned back in his chair, sighed, and thought to himself that Hannah's life had gone downhill after she met her husband. Tony soon arrived at another hospital where his mother Hannah was lying in one of the rooms. He sat down next to her bed, thinking to himself that he was a real idiot. He then asked the woman if it was painful for her to go through all these procedures. Hannah said that she was fine and didn't want her son to worry, and then she asked him if he was the one who sent her the money recently, adding that she was fine and didn't need that amount of money. When Tony asked her what money, she showed him her phone screen, which showed an incoming transfer of 2 million won. The guy didn't know what to answer. He didn't understand who made this transfer. He suspected that it could have been the construction manager, the foreman, or Uncle Hank. Then Hannah asked her son how he was doing in the company, to which the boy replied that it was not difficult for him at all. He was doing quite well, even though he had only finished school. The woman sighed, saying that she was very sorry that her son was having a hard time and that she could not even support him because of her illness. Then Tony suggested that she sleep, seeing that she was already quite tired, to which Hannah replied that she really did get tired very quickly lately, but now her son was next to her and she couldn't just go and fall asleep. Tony said that he would be with her and she could rest. Then he took her hand, and then the woman agreed to get some sleep. After a while, she discovered that Tony had fallen asleep on the bench next to her bed. Then she got up from her bed and covered him with her blanket. She thought to herself that her son was completely stupid. He smelled the same as his father did when he was still alive, the smell of someone working on a construction site, so she couldn't help but notice what he had been doing all this time. She promised herself that she would definitely overcome the disease and help her son, who now, unfortunately, was trying to do everything alone, for which she was immensely grateful to him. Soon, a new day dawned and Tony returned to the construction site. Some of the workers were already sitting in one of the workrooms. The gray-haired man, who was one of the bosses, noticed two guys approaching the building. It was Tony and John. The hero greeted Kevin, his boss, and he asked what happened to John, had he not washed himself. The man said he had a little to drink yesterday, so Kevin told him to get to work as soon as he got himself together. He said that if they saw any Elsung group workers today, they should avoid them. He then turned to Tony and asked him to bring him a cup of coffee with 1 spoon of sugar. When they sat down at the table, he asked the guy how he felt. He replied that everything was the same, but he was only getting worse. Then Kevin asked him if he wanted to become a carpenter. They really missed them. He said that in that case, instead of 110,001, he would receive 150,001. Tony replied that he didn't mind, but he was afraid that his back wouldn't be able to take it. Kevin praised him, said that he would work until the end of his work and really appreciated this quality in him. Tony thought about how that money clearly wasn't from his boss. Then he thought about how hard it was for him to work. But he knew what he was doing, walking around and causing him pain and discomfort. And now there is some unknown person who is sending money to his mother. Then he decided to call Uncle Hank. He thanked him for his help, saying that he had guessed that it was he who had sent his mother the money. He said that he would definitely repay him for his kindness, and then Stephen asked if he had really never left the construction site. When the doctor realized that the guy was still working there, he yelled at him, telling him to finally listen to him and quit. After that, he hung up. And at that moment, Tony's back was again pierced by pain. The guy was upset that his uncle was constantly lecturing him. At that moment, a strange message appeared on his phone. He was extremely surprised by what he saw there. It was exactly what he expected after 200 refusals. The message stated that Elsung congratulated Tony on making it to the second round of interviews, and they were expecting him in the office in a few days. At that moment, some strange blue screen appeared in front of the young man. When he looked up, he saw that there was a strange inscription written on the screen which said that his wish had come true. The hero did not understand how to react to all this. He reached his fingers towards the screen, but his hand just passed through it. The guy didn't understand why this screen didn't disappear and why he could see things like this. He suspected that he was starting to go crazy. Then suddenly the system informed him that he had joined the Elsung employee course and asked him if he wanted to start training. At that moment, he approached one of the workers and asked him for a favor. The man thought that he just wanted to ask him for a cigarette. He pointed ahead and asked if he could see the sign hovering above him. Then the man suddenly screamed, asking if he had gone crazy or if he had simply had a drink somewhere since early morning. Tony quickly apologized to him and left. Why did he run inside the building? He realized that no one could see this thing. He understood why the man reacted that way, because he would also be taken aback if someone talked to him about such a thing, because he really is the only one who can see this nonsense. Then he went into the restroom and stood in front of the mirror. The screen was not reflected in the reflection either, but it was still hanging over him. Tony thought that this was complete madness. He assumed that he was just dreaming all this. He wanted to get into this company, but this strange training was something incomprehensible. He saw it in TV series, but it was still difficult for him to accept what was happening to him. All this, however, becoming a part of a large company was his dream. Then he decided that he would undergo this training no matter what it cost him. The system told him that if he gave up halfway through, he would lose his memories of the course. But Tony was determined. He said he was willing to take the risk, and then the system told him that as a reward he would get a job, and gave him a skill called Potential Employee View. When Tony moved away from the mirror, he realized that everything was swimming before his eyes. While he was trying to come to his senses, the system informed him that the skill evaluation and work efficiency skill can identify possible problems with prolonged use. A debuff called unsuitability appears, so Tony should only use this skill when necessary. After some time, the hero went to the bookstore, still thinking that he did not understand how such a skill could affect the environment. He then decided that by using this ability, he would be able to see something, and after that, he approached the stand with books. He closed his eyes, preparing himself to use the skill, and soon decided to try it. He opened his eyes, mentally trying to activate the gaze of a potential employee. However, the longer he looked at the books, the more clearly he realized that nothing special was happening. Soon, the system appeared in front of him again. It said that this skill was only available in the buildings of the Elsung Group Company. Then he shouted out loud, saying that this system had too many demands. He ended up buying a bunch of books from that store. However, before unpacking them, he went to a construction site to test his skill. When he opened it, he saw that in 2 of the 12 books, some paragraphs were glowing bright green. He returned the rest of the books back to the store, and those books that had notes he read all night long. Soon, the day of the interview arrived, and Tony opened his closet to find some clothes suitable for the day. The system told him that the best choice would be a neat, classic suit. The hero was shaking, but he understood that the main thing in such a situation was not to get nervous. Soon he went outside. It was a pleasant sunny day outside. The hero sat down at the bus stop and continued reading the book, which had notes in it. He continued reading it even while on the bus. Although the constant pop-up messages irritated him, on the other hand, he realized that they weren't helping him much. Soon, one of the company's employees informed him that the interview room was on the second floor. However, Tony suddenly heard the company workers, a man and a woman, quietly talking to each other behind him. The woman told him that this guy has 90-80-61, which is excellent. The system informed him that he had passed the appearance assessment. Tony sighed resignedly, saying that the general information about the interview stated that appearance did not matter. Elsung Group gave free rein to the applicants, but at the same time carefully assessed their every step. The company held a significant position in each of the areas, including fashion, logistics, real estate, tourism, etc., and was frightening in its scale. Soon, Tony and the other candidates went to the interview room, where they took their places and had to take the test. Many of those present were very nervous, not knowing how to answer the questions. There is a big difference between those who know the answers to questions and those who don't. At least in this respect, Tony had an advantage. Soon, men and women entered the office. The girl introduced herself as Kimberly, saying that she joined the company in 2017 and would be assessing skills today. The man's name was Connor. He said that he had been working for the company since 2014 and would be helping candidates with testing. They knew that some of the candidates had traveled from far away, so they asked if anyone had had any inconveniences on their way to the interview. Then one of the candidates raised her hand. She wanted to ask something. She said that she had come from a long distance, and then added that in many companies, all travel expenses are covered by the employer, so she would like to know if their company pays for the trip. Tony didn't think to himself that no company would want to hire a candidate with that attitude. The next moment, the system informed them that the girl, who was a potential employee, had been excluded. He then realized that he needed to continue recording his results, but he thought that the test had 200 questions, and he wondered if he needed to solve them all or if he should make a few mistakes. There was half an hour allotted for 200 questions, and soon Tony realized that he had a minute left. He decided that he did not have to do the entire test. He did not know who gave him this ability, but he decided that it would be a sin not to use it. He must do everything in his power. When the test was over, he went to one of the establishments to meet his colleagues from the construction site. Then Stephen asked him why he didn't come to work yesterday. Since Tony never missed a day of work, Stephen assumed he had a girlfriend, so he suggested that he take her somewhere decent. Tony apologized and thought to himself that if he said that he had gone to an interview at a large company, he would be considered a rat. Stephen laughed, saying he was just a young guy, and then added that he now realized where he was spending all his hard-earned money. Tony didn't think about the fact that he had become very close with the foreman and the others, and if it weren't for his back, he would have continued working there. At that moment, the blue screen appeared in front of him again. The system recommended that he be prepared for the results of the interview. The system said that there was a specific task related to the interview. The general task required him to prepare for the final interview. He was waiting for an interview during which he would have to answer the director's questions. Tony was a little angry. He couldn't believe that the system was offering him a meeting with the director himself, but the punishment for not showing up was a change of construction site. Stephen was distracted from his dinner by the sound of his cell phone. As it turned out, it was his boss, Kevin, who was calling him. He asked him to arrange a meeting for him and Tony. Stephen said he would send a guy to him right away. He then turned to Tony, saying that the boss wanted to talk to him. He smiled, asking what was wrong, since Tony didn't look surprised at all. Tony sighed, saying that his boss was paying him, so there was no point in avoiding him. He then left the establishment, realizing that he needed to meet and talk to the boss. Soon, Tony came to the construction site. The atmosphere between him and Kevin was quite tense. The man then said that he had tried his best, and therefore tomorrow Tony would work as a carpenter for the foreman. The hero asked him why he made such a sudden decision. Then Kevin screamed, asking where else he could find someone like Tony. He asked him what he would do without the carpenter. Then the hero replied that he was fine with it. Kevin said he would find someone who could paint the walls, but finding a carpenter was not so easy. He couldn't lose someone like Tony. The hero was very annoyed by the fact that the boss shouted at him for so long it was impossible to talk. At this point, the system told him that he had a side quest open. He needed to listen to the boss's story to the end, since the boss considered him a good person. The hero was not very happy with this task, but he had no choice. He turned to Kevin, asking him to be a little quieter. He said that he would listen to him, and then he himself would need to tell his boss something. Kevin then said that now that he didn't have a second carpenter, he couldn't complete the construction plan. Because of this, he loses millions of one a day. Then he shouted again, saying that Tony couldn't leave. The hero thought about it. He was only guessing. But in his opinion, it was 100% his fault. He decided he had to back off, so Kevin asked him to help him for at least a week. Tony was reluctant to agree, but decided that he would help him, but only for a week. Kevin immediately became happy and thanked him, saying that he was trying to take care of him. He thanked the guy for coming to him. Then he said that this was the only time he asked him for something like this. He took his phone out of his pocket and called the president, saying that everything was decided and he would be able to complete the plan in a week. Within 7 days, they would finish the construction. Soon evening came and the workers asked the boss how everything went, and he said that everything was great. Soon, two men approached Tony. One of them was his boss, Steven, and next to him stood a man he didn't know. Steven asked him to come down, telling him to say hello to the director of the El Sung group. Tony did not get down from the stepladder and shook the man's hand, saying that this was their first meeting. The director said that his name was Charlie. He began to worry when he learned that the construction plan was in jeopardy, and thanked Tony again for his help. And although the hero grinned, saying that he was glad to help, he thought to himself that he was only here for a week, since his back was already starting to give out. Then Charlie said that he was going to the office the day after tomorrow, and since this was his last time there, he offered the men a drink. However, Tony looked away in embarrassment, saying that he couldn't go because he had a meeting scheduled for tomorrow. After work, he went back to the hospital to see Uncle Hank. As soon as he left for the office, everyone else in the hospital heard a terrifying scream. The doctor tried to fix his back, but the situation was already so dire that any touch was accompanied by incredible pain for Tony. Then he told him to go to the second floor for physical therapy. Tony's eyes filled with tears of pain. He was very worried about the fact that he had an interview coming up, and the doctor continued to reproach him for not caring about his health at all. The next day, Tony nevertheless came to the El Sung group for an interview. He and two other candidates appeared before the directors, and the hero introduced himself by saying that his name was Tony. When he looked up, he saw a familiar man standing in front of him. It was Charlie, the same company director he had met the previous evening. Charlie chuckled, saying that this was not the first time they had met, and so the guy could sit down. Once all the candidates had taken their seats, the directors decided to begin the interviews. Charlie volunteered to go first, and the others present followed suit. Then he turned to a man, one of the candidates, and asked him to stand up. He noticed how the man was dressed. He was wearing white socks with black pants. Then he asked him what he thought about his appearance. The candidate replied that it seemed like these clothes didn't go together very well. Tony wondered if the system was warning him that the pressure would be high at this stage. Then Charlie asked him why he still wore those clothes, since he himself thought that they didn't look very good. Tony realized that the atmosphere in the room was now causing great discomfort to the candidates. This atmosphere brings out all their hidden traits. The candidate couldn't answer Charlie's question, so the man asked him why he was silent, if he couldn't control his emotions. Tony understood that the first thing he needed to do in such a situation was to calm down. This interview was testing his restraint and ability to control his emotions, so he needed to accept it. Seeing the confusion on the candidate's face, Charlie sighed in displeasure. The man was too stressed to get a word out. He was unable to handle the situation, and when everyone realized this, Charlie asked him to sit down and began interviewing the next candidate. It soon became clear that the girl had no experience in social work, and although she tried to justify herself by saying that she had been studying all this time, Charlie said that this was not what their company needed. When he asked her how she was going to work with clients, tears came to her eyes and the girl didn't know what to answer. Soon the girl's interview also ended. She left the room in tears. Tony realized that Director Charlie had asked the question first to throw everyone off track, because the rest of the questions required mental preparation. Soon it was Tony's turn. He stood up from his chair and proudly introduced himself. The hero had no intention of leaving here empty-handed. Then Charlie asked him what his education was. The hero replied that he was a banking specialist, but Charlie knew that he had not attended university. Tony said that he actually didn't have a college education. Then Charlie asked him if he wanted to say anything else. The hero thought that if he blurted out something wrong, he would be crossed off the list of candidates, so he decided to be honest. He knew he had to get their attention, so he said he needed to make money. Charlie said that they were doing the same thing and he had come here for the same reason, but he asked why he had chosen to work instead of going to university. Tony said he didn't regret his decision one bit. Instead of studying, he went to work at a construction site, and in the evenings he spent all his free time on self-education. He said he never neglected it. He may not have gone to college like everyone else, but he earned his engineering qualifications through online courses. He tried to compensate for the lack of a university in every way possible, and the result was that he was able to obtain an education in the economic field. Charlie was very surprised by this answer. He turned to look at his colleagues and smiled, saying that it was wonderful. Thus, his part of the interview was finished, and he handed the floor over to his colleagues. The man asked the hero what he could do for their company. Tony knew it was a difficult question for the average person, but he was ready for it. The reason he wants to work here is because the job is not too stressful and the pay is good. This way he can pay his mother's hospital bills and not have to worry about what he will eat or his health. He will be free. Then he said that as long as it does not contradict the laws and norms of society, he is ready to do anything. Then the man asked him why he had put forward such conditions. Tony said that otherwise the image and future of the company that gives him the order will be destroyed. He supports the honesty of the company and its contribution to the development of the country. Only by fulfilling these conditions will El Sung Group move in the right direction in accordance with its goals. The hero knew that this was not the perfect answer. He just had to convince them that there was no such thing as a perfect answer because this interview was designed to see how people behaved in stressful situations. The man then decided to ask him the next question, asking if he had a girlfriend. Tony said he doesn't have a girlfriend. It just so happens that there are practically no women around him. He said that if a man had someone suitable, he would be happy to meet this girl, to which Charlie laughed. He then reported that Tony had done an excellent job in the interview. He said that the interview was over and all candidates could go. Soon evening came and Tony returned to the construction site. Stephen approached him, surprised that the guy had come here. He waved his hand and said that he had a lot of work to do in the control room today. He noticed that Tony looked a little strange, so he asked him what was wrong. The hero wanted to tell him what was really going on, but at that moment their conversation was interrupted by a strange sound. As it turned out, John decided to approach them, but he tripped over a beam and fell. The hero thought about the fact that John was in trouble again, but he had too much work to worry about such things. Then Stephen said that they were having dinner together that day and invited Tony to go with them. However, the hero said that he would like to talk to the boss. Stephen, like everyone else, was curious about what they wanted to tell Tony. Then the guy said that he was finishing his last week here, which really surprised the men. At that moment, the system sent him a new task. He needed to attend the evening and listen to stories. There was no reward or penalty for refusal, which was extremely surprising for the system's orders. Then Tony asked his boss what they were having for dinner, and Stephen chuckled and said that they were having soup today. Then Tony said that if the boss fed him beef, he would switch to the manager's side. John and his partner were very pleased that Tony had made this decision. Moreover, they also wanted to taste the meat. Stephen tried to look displeased, saying that he would only agree to it because everyone asked. Soon the men arrived at the establishment and decided to drink to such a good day. Stephen said that this week had been very difficult. Lately, people are becoming less and less willing to become engineers. His brother is a gas worker and he himself worked in his specialty for 20 years. He didn't understand what the point of studying was if it was so difficult to earn good money, so he decided not to study further, considering it useless. John said that this is all for a reason. The manager says this because he is already too old. At that moment, Tony thought about the fact that even when drunk, he doesn't talk nonsense, and the technical staff finds this very difficult. Nowadays, industry is driven by science, technology, and pharmaceuticals. When everyone was so drunk that they couldn't think clearly, the hero turned to the window and began to look out at the city at night. A whole week has passed since that evening. Tony was at the El Sung group when his boss called him and asked why he hadn't shown up for work. Then Tony said that yesterday he had talked about taking the day off because he needed rest. However, Stephen insisted he asked Tony to come to work, as he had not slept all night and did not want to work alone. However, Tony said that he would not be able to go out and would not come tomorrow. And before the manager could answer, he hung up. At that moment, one of the company's employees approached him and said that she would take him to the debate site. She said that the second interview is a discussion between 10 people. Tony can enter into the discussion according to the words of the speaker. The topic of the panel discussion is OECD countries, where South Korea is part of the Commonwealth Economic and Development Organization. Today, they will discuss the issue of high prices for education and ways to solve this problem. When all the candidates arrived in the room, the host announced that when answering, they should raise their hand, state their number and name, and only then speak. Tony then realized that this was exactly what he had been worried about, since this topic required a broad background in social work. He mentally thanked the group leader for the invaluable experience. Soon, the man leading the debate made notes on his tablet and said they needed to begin. Tony looked up confidently, preparing for the group interview. He was assigned number 2. Soon, the discussion began, and number 3 entered the debate, raising his hand and saying that he believed that the economic situation of recent years had had a serious impact on the country. As a result, the cost of education has increased greatly, and in order to be among the top 10 economically strongest countries, they must not skimp on human resources. If the cost of education is reduced, they will be able to provide more talented people. Tony looked at him in surprise, thinking that this guy was a real idiot. All the discussions had already been given the topic of the reasons for the increase in tuition fees and ways to solve this problem, and this guy just repeated the question and did not give any answer. He thought it was a good thing he had decided not to answer first, since now he had time to think about his answer. The discussion soon turned to participant number 7, who said that her parents spent 300 million won to provide her with a good education, and that such amounts lead to a decrease in the birth rate, since not every parent can spend that much on several children, and she believed that it was necessary to encourage an increase in the population and increase payments to families with children. Number 3 agreed with her, saying that families were breaking up, the birth rate was falling, the cost of education was rising every year, and encouraging more children was a great way out. Tony thought that this sounded good, but the company had nothing to do with it, since it was not a government enterprise, so they did not have to worry about such issues. Then he raised his hand, suggesting that the situation be looked at from a different angle. With this statement, he greatly surprised speakers number 3 and 7. Tony said their country ranks first in the world in terms of cost of education and second in terms of the number of applicants. Then he stood up from his seat and went to the board, saying that they should talk about the quality of education. He asked everyone present to look at the OECD education rankings. The quality of the education system is ranked 75th. From a young age, they have the choice to continue their education after school or not. Compared to Germany, where education is compulsory, they have the right to choose where to go to study, be it college, university, or self-education. As a result, the number of jobs fully corresponds to demand, and although the average salary there is higher than in Korea, the difference in incomes in different specialties is not so great. However, their country has a personnel imbalance with insufficient support for areas such as science, IT, and other technologies, and most engineering positions being filled by foreign workers. Tony believed that if their education system became more streamlined like Germany's, it would bear fruit. It would reduce the cost of education in the country and help its development as a whole. When he looked at the other debaters, he saw the doubt in their eyes and realized that they were confused by the way he connected these facts. Then participant number 10 asked if he really thought so. It seemed to him that participant number 2 was dissatisfied with the education system in their country. Tony was extremely surprised by such a statement on his part. He didn't expect that there would be an open attack here, but he understood that the main thing in such situations was not to panic. He then apologized if he had offended anyone, saying that his intention was not to slander their country. Participant number 10 said that he really didn't like his words. The foreign education system does not take into account the traditions of their country, and he thinks that introducing something like this is a huge mistake. They have enough outstanding and talented people. Everyone here had been educated in Seoul or abroad, and they were sitting here only because of their knowledge, but he didn't understand why number 2 thought they were worse than the Germans. The debate leader then turned to debater number 10 and asked his name. The man replied that his name was Ian. The manager then thanked him for his participation, saying that he could go free. When he heard this, his face turned red, either from misunderstanding or from anger. The manager said that he did not think he was suitable for working in their company, but he thanked him for his good work. Tony thought about how companies nowadays need talent that can integrate into a team, and this Ian puts others down. Considering himself superior given the company's demands, he is the worst of all who could come across. There is no point in hiring someone who wants to be in the center, pushing out everyone else. After this, Ian left the room, slamming the door loudly behind him. Then the manager said that they had a second topic dedicated to national pension reform. The debaters discussed this topic a lot, and the hero began to think that this would never end. 25 minutes passed, and they still had a disagreement that was not being resolved. He wanted all this to end as soon as possible. Judging by the examiner's face, he was also fed up with all this. Then Tony decided to speak up, saying that at this rate they would not be able to come to a consensus, but that summing up each speech, 2 prevailing views could be identified. Participant number 1 said that the national and occupational pension should be integrated, following the example of Japan, and participant number 6 responded that the shortcoming of the national pension could be supplemented by private payments. Then he suggested listening to one more person and summing up the results by voting. The examiner noted to himself that there was a heated discussion going on within the group, but this guy was silent. Typically, people like him act as mediators in disputes, and that's exactly the kind of person their company needs. Soon, he thanked all the participants for their work and said that they were finished for the day. After everyone left, he made a note next to Tony's name, saying that this guy had definitely done it. When the hero left the office, he heard someone screaming. The man was saying that he had been treated unfairly. When he turned around, he saw that participant number 10 was arguing with the examiner, saying that he was kicked out unfairly. Then the hero realized that there were even those here who did not admit their mistake. When the hero blinked, he saw that the examiner seemed to be covered in a green aura. Tony didn't understand why his skill was activated. Now every person looked completely different in his eyes. He looked back to see the rest of the people in the hallway. Behind him stood a man and a woman. The woman had an orange aura and the man had a yellow one. Today's interview was useful. He learned something new. Firstly, if you blink 3 times in a row, it activates automatically. Secondly, each color is specific to a certain person. It can be red, orange, or green. He assumed that the red ones were people under 20, the orange ones were people over 20, and the green ones were people over 30, but he doubted that they were divided by age. After some time, the hero returned to his job at the construction site. While he was busy working, a new message came on his phone. It said that he had passed an interview at the Elsung Group. The last interview with the directors would take place tomorrow at 3 o'clock in the afternoon at the company's main building. The hero was extremely happy with this news. He was happy that the day of the last interview would finally come, but he understood that vigilance would still not hurt him. He decided that he had to remain calm and had to pass the final interview to fulfill his dream. After that, he approached John and decided to give him some advice, saying that he was putting too much paint on the roller. Thus, it would run out faster. However, the guy did not hear him and again took a huge amount of paint and then directed it upward to paint the walls. When Tony looked up, he saw a huge amount of paint flying right onto his face. All this paint ended up on his head. John immediately climbed down from the stepladder, apologizing to his partner. And although Tony was very unhappy, he said that he shouldn't worry about such trifles. John continued to change, saying that he was very sorry, but the hero calmed him down, saying that he was okay. He then headed towards the showers and met his supervisor, Steven, on the way. The man asked him what happened, to which the hero replied that it was nothing special, just work-related issues, and said that he would go to the dorm to wash up. Steven said it was far, so he should go to the bathhouse on the first floor. It was opening today. Tony had no doubt he was sure of how the other workers had reacted to this, but Steven said that they themselves had sent word that everyone should come in and wash up after work today, so there would be no misunderstanding. Then the hero went down the stairs to wash off the paint. He felt very comfortable walking around with his hair stuck together. Soon he arrived at the right door. When he entered, he immediately took off all his dirty clothes and headed to the shower. After that, he took a hot shower, washing off all the paint. Then he went a little to the middle where there was already a man. He asked him what he was doing. Tony told him that he was a construction worker. The man suggested that this must be very hard work, since he came here covered in paint from head to toe. Then the hero smiled and asked if this man was really the boss here. When the man answered him that he was indeed the boss, the hero immediately became delighted, saying that his bathhouse was simply something. It was a wonderful job, and then asked if he was paid well. The man said that he was paid enough not to envy others. Then the hero thanked him again for his efforts. After this, the man suddenly dove sharply under the water. Tony panicked, thinking that the man had suddenly become ill and drowned. He immediately rushed to his aid, intending to pull him out from under the water. At that moment, the man emerged and laughed, asking if he really thought he was dead. Then he said that he actually had a curse on him. He said that in the bathhouse he always has to press, especially after he sweats a lot. Tony said it was very interesting and thought to himself that he was doing the right thing. You can't identify possible inconveniences for customers without testing it yourself. He said that the man was an excellent specialist in his field and looked very healthy, to which his friend told him that he too should take care of his health, not forgetting to exercise and eat well while he was still young. Then he suddenly stood up, saying that it was time for him to go. Tony wished him luck and health, saying that he hoped that everything would go well for him. The man smiled and said that he also hoped that everything would be fine for the guy. When Tony left the bathhouse, a man in a suit followed him in. He headed straight inside the bathhouse. Once inside, he called out to the president, who turned out to be the same man. He said the closing ceremony was in 40 minutes and asked if he would go to it. As it turns out, President Christopher really did have a curse after the construction. If he didn't take a bath here, an accident would definitely happen within a year. The man hoped that everything would be fine this year. Soon, the day of the final interview arrived. The hero tried to be as calm and collected as possible. The system informed him that all he had to do was pass the final interview, but Tony was unhappy, saying that it was not that easy. When the system told him that he just had to trust, he sighed with displeasure, saying that since it wasn't going to help, he would do everything himself. He needed to remember everything, from the company's past to the events of today. He soon accepted the company and greeted everyone present, thanking them for giving him a chance. Then the committee chairman asked Tony to sit down. The hero thought about the fact that the system told him not to worry, but at a meeting with directors and luck will not work. Then he decided it was time to put the skill to use. When he looked at the directors, he saw that one of them was emitting a blue aura and the other one was emitting a purple aura. They all looked to be over 50 years old. He doubted that they were really directors. Then the only man said that Tony had applied for a management position related to credit and banking. The man approached another principal, saying that this guy had not attended college or university. Then he asked how he was able to get an education himself. The man said that this guy must be very good to have made it this far, and asked the assistant to give him the results of past interviews. Soon all the directors saw that Tony had received top marks in the interview. They were extremely surprised that he did better than graduates from the country's most popular universities. The assistant then leaned over to one of the directors and said he thought this guy could be classified as an SSS. This group usually includes relatives and descendants of the chairman's family or ordinary mortals who have reached their level. The director then turned to Tony and asked what kind of job he would like to do. The hero said that he would prefer an office job, but whatever activity they assigned him, he would be happy. When the director said that Tony couldn't go, why, the hero was extremely surprised. Then the director said that the interview was over and thanked the guy for his work. When he came out, they began to discuss whether he could be a relative of the chairman or someone from his entourage, and decided to thoroughly check this information. One of the directors suggested that he had been deliberately disguised as an ordinary economist so that they would not suspect anything. Another man agreed with him, saying that the chairman's policy was precisely to start from the very bottom. It was all too suspicious because the HR department noticed it first. They shouldn't make mistakes either. They assumed that a person from the SS group had come to them. The story moves to an expensive building. A young man came to the office of his father, who was extremely unhappy that his son decided to show up after so much time. He said that he had failed. Although he had prepared for so long, such shame had never happened in their family. The young man said he was very sorry and asked his father to give him another chance. When the man started yelling at him, saying that he had not shown up for the interview and had failed, the young man clenched his fists in anger. The man then turned again to his son, Tony, and told him to speak openly to him and not hide anything. The story moves back to the construction site. It was another one of Tony's working days. He received another message on his phone, which said that he had been accepted for a position at Elsung Group. The hero knew that it would not be easy to pass the interview with the directors, and he had a feeling that it was a waste of time. He then received another message saying that he needed to attend a mandatory medical examination at the regional hospital, but that he could also provide medical reports from another hospital. The hero didn't know what to do. He wanted to get a job in the company because of his back, but now he doubted that this would not become a hindrance. Then he decided to go to the hospital to see Uncle Hank. When he entered the office, the doctor asked if his back was hurting again. Tony scratched the back of his head and said that he was fine today. He said he had passed a final interview for a position in a large company. Hank was very happy for him, saying that now he would finally not be putting unnecessary strain on his spine. However, he had a feeling that something was wrong here. Then Tony lowered his head in shame and said that it was nonsense. He understood that he could only ask his uncle about it, but he could not utter a word. Then he said he wanted him to write him a prescription for painkillers. Hank said he guessed that was the reason the guy came there. When he looked at him, he realized that Tony had a very sad look, which surprised the man, since he usually had a very confident attitude. He didn't understand what the problem was. He remembered Tony's words about him passing the final interview at a large company. Then the doctor thought that since he was going to get a job, he needed to get a medical examination, and then he realized what this guy wanted from him. He understood that if he was caught, his license would easily be revoked. However, Hank suddenly started typing something on his computer, thinking that this guy was just like his father, making everyone worry about him. Soon after, the hero went downstairs to get a prescription from the nurse, and then she handed him something else. As it turned out, it was a disc. At that moment, the hero heard Hank's voice from behind him, and he decided to congratulate him once again. He said that the guy would pay for his medications as soon as he received his first salary. Tony smiled, realizing that his uncle had helped him a lot. Soon the hero went back home. He received another message from the company, which said that he had passed the general selection of personnel at El Sung Group. The hero understood that he survived only thanks to his uncle's help, and this made him feel very good. At that moment, the system window appeared above his head again, informing him that Tony had access to the employee store and that his current balance was 5 points. The system reported that the store is a great tool that will help solve problems that arise during work. You can buy special items for points that he will earn by completing tasks. When a window appeared in front of the hero, allowing him to open a store for employees, he immediately agreed. Soon, the system window increased. Among the goods for new employees was a sobering pill that instantly removes alcohol from the body, lenses of vision through walls, allowing to see through walls in a radius of 2 meters for 1 minute, a candy that stops drowsiness when taken for 6 hours. It removes signs of drowsiness, as well as a charming aroma that will make the owner attractive. For the opposite sex, the effect increases twofold. Tony couldn't believe his eyes. It seemed to him that it was all a game or some kind of magic. The system then asked him if he wanted to lose his memory, and the hero hastened to explain that he didn't mean that. The system said it existed for him to succeed, and he refused it, so Tony apologized for expressing himself incorrectly and asked the system not to take it too seriously. Then the system said that it understood the user's words, but in the third one you need to be more careful, and this statement made Tony very angry. Why did the system give him a quest in which he had to talk to his mother, calm her down by telling her that he had found a job in a new company? As a reward, he would receive 6 points and also open a side quest. As a punishment, the side quest would remain closed. The hero thought about the fact that even if it weren't for the system, he was still going to go to his mother, which he did in the near future. He came to her room and knocked on the door. When Hannah realized that her son had arrived, she smiled. She said she was feeling better, so her son had nothing to worry about. Then Tony decided to tell her that he had been accepted to work at El Sung Group. Hannah was very happy, saying that it was great news. Then the guy said that in that case she needed to get better, and they would go home together. Then Hannah said that her aunt had bought and brought her a whole box of apples that day, and she offered to take a few for her son. Tony was pleased to see his mother finally smiling. The woman said that her son studied hard and got a position in a good company, so she is very happy for him. Then Tony stood up and said he was going to go to the nurse for a stroller. He asked his mother to wait for him and went into the corridor. When he left the room, the system informed him that the quest had been completed. She then informed him that Hank was very worried about his mother, so Tony should call him and ask him to come to the hospital. He would get 5 points and there would be no punishment. When the hero saw the name of the quest, which was called First Love, he was shocked. He did not understand what the system wanted to say with this because Hank was his father's best friend. His father and Uncle Hank were best friends when they were young. He was the same friend who came and scolded his father every time for not taking care of his health. Tony remembered these moments from his childhood well. Now the hero realized that all this time Hank was not married. He still couldn't get over the fact that his father's best friend was in love with his mother. Then he turned to the system, asking if all this was true, to which the system replied that it could not lie. The hero then asked her why she was giving him this task, and the system replied that she was doing it for the sake of the success of a user named Tony. The hero did not understand who was behind this whole system. However, the system responded that such information was not available to him. The hero looked around, not understanding what he should do. Since this task had a time limit, he had about half an hour left. He walked back to his mother's room and stood near the door. When he got inside, his mother asked him where he had been for so long. Tony said he needed to make a call. Hannah said that if he was busy, he could go, and her son replied that he was fine. Then he decided to ask his mother if she remembered Uncle Hank. Hannah was surprised when her son asked her such a question, and Tony was also surprised by her reaction. His mother's tone made him feel a little strange, perhaps because his father was dead. Then he stood up and said that he would call and then return to her. The hero headed towards the exit of the ward, taking his phone out of his pocket as he went. Then he dialed Uncle Hank's number. The doctor was not expecting this call. Then the hero decided to ask him directly if he liked his mother. The doctor did not know what to answer. He asked if something had happened to Hannah. Without waiting for an answer, he immediately jumped up from his seat and asked which hospital they were currently in. Tony replied that they were at Seoul General Hospital number 403 and then hung up. At that moment, the system appeared next to him again. It said that the hero made an excellent choice, but Tony was extremely unhappy with the way this strange thing was behaving. He asked her again what she was, but the system still didn't answer. Uncle Hank showed up at the hospital 15 minutes after the call. He ran quickly down the corridor, not paying attention to anyone, including Tony. He ran here without even taking off his hospital gown. He eventually met Hannah, their first meeting since the death of the hero's father. Soon, the system informed Tony that the quest was completed. As a reward, he received 5 points. When the hero calmed down and thought soberly, he came to the conclusion that he considered the only correct one. He looked at the system window and wondered if all this could be true. Then he asked her if his father was behind this system. The system provided him with one-sided assistance, sometimes turning into threats, but it did everything to help him. However, the system said it could not answer this question. The hero again assumed that his father was the one behind this, and that was why he did not answer directly. However, the system did not respond, and then the hero decided that he was still interested in what kind of creature it was, and therefore he would learn about it gradually. However, something else was worrying him now. He wondered what his mother and Uncle Hank were doing at the moment. When he looked through the door window, he saw that they were talking to each other. The hero did not hear the conversation, but he saw that there was a smile on his mother's face. Uncle Hank was smiling too, and the hero had never seen such a sincere smile on his face. The system again informed the hero that he had made a good choice. Soon it was 10 p.m., at which point all guests had to leave the hospital. Hank left the room and saw Tony behind the door. He assumed that the guy was eavesdropping on their conversation, but the hero said that he just came here. Then the doctor approached him and apologized for his behavior. However, the hero said that he had nothing to apologize for. Hank said that in any case he was grateful to him for his help and for calling him, and now it was time for him to go. Finally, Tony asked him again if he liked his mother. Then Hank looked away, embarrassed, saying that he didn't know how to answer that question. Tony looked down in displeasure. He expected a clearer answer. He told his uncle that he would be at the training center for the next 3 days. His aunt sometimes came to visit his mother, but he would like his uncle to come sometimes too. He paid his mother's medical bills and sent him to the company for a medical checkup. And now the hero realized that all this was not because of his friendship with his dad, but because of his mom. He couldn't understand his feelings, so he told Hank to decide for himself. One way or another, he were the only ones who could take care of Hannah. Hank said he understood what the guy meant, and said he would think about it because it was not an easy decision. Tony spent the next 3 days at the training center. When he returned to the construction site, the manager announced that they were moving to a new construction site tomorrow. He asked the workers to go to bed early so that they could start work as soon as possible. Then Tony turned to him saying that he needed to say something. Stephen assumed that he wanted to take the day off again. He said that the guy had to go out, the boss took a long weekend, so there was no one to work. Then the hero said that he found a new job, and so he had to go. Stephen screamed, asking how much he needed to pay him to get him out of this idea. He asked if it would be enough for him if he got $4 million a month here. Then Tony apologized for what he said earlier. He said that he had passed the final interview at Elsung Group. At first, Stephen couldn't believe his ears. When he realized that Tony was actually serious, his face contorted in shock. Then Tony said that he wouldn't be able to come out for his shift tomorrow. Stephen was extremely surprised that he didn't even go to university, and yet he got an interview at such a big company. The hero looked away in shame, not knowing what to answer. Then Stephen said that he had to work hard to avoid losing face. Tony didn't look up, saying he was truly sorry. At that moment, John and his partner approached them. John asked if it was time for them to get something to eat since Tony was leaving. Stephen yelled at him because they were talking about this boy leaving, and all he could think about was food. Then one of the workers said that his wife had called him and that he needed to go home. Stephen was very unhappy that the man wanted to leave early. However, the worker said that he spends all day at work and that he also wants to be at home sometimes. He said that even Tony decided to quit here. There was an awkward pause between the men. Then Stephen turned to the hero again. Tony assumed he was going to start scolding him again. However, Stephen told him to come with them and have dinner. He said that he was not suggesting it because he liked him. He was doing it because he felt awkward. Tony smiled. He understood that even though the leader said so, he remained himself until the very end. When the men arrived at the restaurant, Stephen said that Tony would not leave until he had a good meal, because office work is not as easy as it seems at first glance. However, the hero stated that he was ready for such work. Stephen countered by saying that he hadn't gone to university, it would be easy for him, and that the others would laugh at him if they knew the whole truth. Then Tony looked up at him, saying that he understood all of this. However, he also understood that he had to do it. Steven said that if he doesn't succeed in this company, he can return to them. They will always be glad to see him. There will always be a place for Tony here. The hero thanked his boss for such warm words. Then his partner cleared his throat and took something out of his pocket, saying that if he had known in advance, he would have prepared a better gift. Then he pulled an envelope out of his pocket and handed it to Tony. The guy was surprised and asked what it was. The man asked him to open the envelope and accept it without questions. Like a real adult would, he said that this amount would be enough for several pairs of shoes. The hero immediately raised his hands up, saying that he could not accept such an amount, and asked the man to take the envelope back. At that moment, John took the envelope and said that in that case he would take the money. The man immediately shouted at him, telling him to give the envelope back to Tony. John was surprised by such a sharp reaction and returned the money back to the guy. Tony smiled and said he would still accept them. He was glad that even though he was gone, the men were kind to him that day, the last time he saw his former colleagues. The very next day, he joined the El Sung group. The hero took a large black suitcase with him and went to the bus. He greeted the man who was directing the boarding of the bus and gave his name. The man immediately looked at his tablet to check the data. He told Tony to get on the first bus. However, he suddenly stopped the guy and asked if he was really born in 1992. However, Tony replied that this was not his year of birth. As it turned out, he was born in 1994. When the man heard this, he said that in that case, he needed to get on the third bus, leave his luggage in the cargo hold, and go inside. Tony thought about the fact that apparently someone here had the same name as him. As he got on the bus, he continued to think about it. His name was not the most common, so this situation was quite surprising. Then he finally found his seat and sat down there, breathing a sigh of relief. Then the bus manager said that since everyone was seated, they were heading to the training center for new employees. Tony smiled, realizing that he was now the company's new employee. He was distracted from his thoughts by the sound of the phone, which was in his pocket. He received a message from Hank. The man asked him not to worry about his mother and to work hard. At that moment, one of the men who was sitting on the bus suddenly stood up in the middle of the aisle. He greeted everyone present, saying that his name was Marvin. He was the deputy director of the sales department of the El Sung Group branch in one of the cities and was responsible for the third bus. He also thanked everyone present for their work. Everyone present on the bus also thanked him. Marvin said that he would be their supervisor for the next 4 weeks at the training center. He asked if they had decided on the type of work they would do. Everyone present on the bus began to look awkwardly at each other, not understanding what the man was talking about. Then he said that he had asked the question incorrectly and asked those who already knew which department they wanted to work in to raise their hands. As it turned out, no one present raised their hand. Marvin said that training and retraining of new employees is an important process in the company. The company monitors employees, evaluates their work, and based on the results of the training offers a position. He joined the company just after such training. He was assigned to the sales department, where he is now doing an excellent job. Then one of the employees asked what if he got a job he didn't want to do. Marvin said that first of all, they should keep their grades high, and the top 10th of the students will be given the opportunity to choose their own position. The remaining 90% will be distributed by managers, but even with the first option, there is a chance that the position will not be suitable for the employee. However, he said there was one loophole. After a year, they could apply to change their occupation, although he did not recommend this route, since requests could simply be rejected and their previous team would not accept them back. When Tony heard this, he was very surprised. He realized that from the very beginning of the company, each of its employees was being closely watched. He wondered what a troublemaker would look like if there were problems within the team. He didn't understand what to do if his health worsened and he urgently needed surgery. He was afraid that for this he would have to quit his job when he would lose everything, and he would have to start over. Then the hero firmly decided that he must hold out to the last. Soon the buses arrived in the desired city. For Tony, all this was new. He felt a little strange, but at the same time he had a feeling that a bright future awaited him. After some time, the buses arrived at the company's training center. Marvin looked around at all the workers, making sure everyone was off the buses. He said that now all employees will receive things. Tracksuits of appropriate sizes and name badges have been prepared for them. Soon everyone arrived at the center where their luggage was checked and they were given the necessary clothes. One of the workers greeted Tony, said that he had been assigned room B13 on the 3rd floor and asked him to change clothes and investigate the assembly area. When the hero raised his head, he saw that the floors were numbered starting from the 2nd with the letters A, B, C. He was surprised that men and women lived together. However, at that moment, one of the workers said that men were placed in rooms 1 through 25 and women in rooms 26 through 50. Tony noted that they had been very clever in dividing the workers by gender. After some time, he was already on his floor. Before getting ready, he needed to have time to change his clothes. Soon, he found the room he needed. When he entered inside, he realized that there was one bed for 2. The hero sighed with relief. He expected that 3 more people would live in the same room with him. Then he took out the clothes that were given to him at the entrance. It was a fairly simple tracksuit, and he wondered why they had chosen to wear that uniform for everyone. At that moment, a young man in a suit and glasses entered the room. Tony turned around and looked at who had arrived. The guy chuckled, saying that the room was quite small. Tony disagreed with him, and then introduced himself. The man scratched his head awkwardly, saying that his name was Archie. Tony noted to himself that Archie looked like a good man. He looked older, so the hero thought about whether he should bow to him. He approached him, saying that he seemed to be older than him, to which Archie replied that he was 29. Tony chuckled, saying he was 25 and hoped it wouldn't be a problem for them. He asked him where he should sleep and suggested that he take the second floor. Archie said that in that case he would stay on the first floor and thanked the guy for his concern because the second floor was too much trouble. Tony said that it was no big deal since they would have to live together for a whole month. Then Archie was surprised that Tony got a job so early. Because he was only 25 years old, he was surprised that Tony graduated from university in 3 years. Then the hero said that he received a degree in lending and banking, so he really did get an education earlier than the others. At that moment, loudspeakers throughout the building turned on, and a voice said that the interns were expected in the main building hall in 10 minutes. The man said that they had little time left. Archie chuckled, saying he felt like they were in the army. Tony agreed with him and then suggested that they go to the gym or they would be late. After some time, the hero noted that the first day was quite good. The managers apparently want to check the attendance. More than 260 people gathered in one room to listen to the speech. The man who spoke on stage said that before they began training the company's new employees, the director of training wanted to say a few words to them. At this moment, another man came onto the stage. The man greeted him on stage and bowed, then stepped aside so he could take his place. The man in glasses leaned toward the microphone, smiled broadly, and greeted the interns. The interns greeted him back. Then the man said that it was somehow quiet here. He then shouted into the microphone, asking if this was what new employees at the company were supposed to be like, and then greeted them again, this time very loudly. This time, the interns greeted the man as loudly as he did. The director said that until last year, he was the executive director of the Elsung Group head office. His name is Philip. He was appointed to the Elsung Group Training Center earlier this year. He said their group is among the top 5 companies in South Korea, but they were at the bottom at first. The 60s were difficult years. Philip went to Japan to hone his skills, and then he asked the trainees if they knew where the first refrigerator was made in South Korea. One of the interns raised his hand and said that it was made at Elsung Group Electronics. Philip said that this was the correct answer. It took them 4 years to develop and create the first refrigerator. They went through a process of trial and error. Refrigerators were very expensive in those days, but now everyone has this household item. Tony reflected on the fact that the director of the training center's speech was built around the history of the company. In particular, he spoke about her past and future. At this point, Philippe declared that from this day on, the trainees were not just new employees, they were the entire future of Elsung Group. From the moment they entered this training center and throughout their career growth, they would be Elsung Group people. So he suggested that starting from tomorrow, they should try their best for the future of the company. Soon the interns met Marvin again. The man said that lights out starts at 10 p.m. After 10, each of the interns will be on duty on the floor in shifts. He said that the interns should elect a floor leader who would be responsible for organizing their work. Then he asked for a raise of hands for those who wanted to take on the responsibility. Tony decided that he should try to take on the role of head boy. Some other interns also raised their hands. Tony looked around and saw that besides him, several people also wanted to try themselves in the role of a headman. When he turned his head the other way, he saw that his roommate, Archie, had also raised his hand. Soon the decision was made, and after that, all the interns went to their rooms. However, Tony was a little unhappy. It was his first day here, and he was already dying of boredom. He had no one to talk to since his roommate had become the floor leader, and he was left all alone. As it turned out, Marvin actually chose Archie as the head boy and thanked everyone else for their activity. He said that the duration of the headman's work is 1 week, after which they will discuss the pros and cons of his work, and this role can also be voluntarily left if a person feels that he is not coping. The trainees said that everything was clear to them. Then Tony decided to leave his room and thought about what he should do. He looked around and saw that the interns were talking with their colleagues. He thought maybe he should take a shower since the rooms had no toilet, no kitchen, and no shower. There was a shared laundry room, shared shower, shared toilet, and so on. There were cameras in the corridors, so everything was under surveillance. However, the hero still decided that he should take a shower. He decided that all this was trivial. While working on a construction site, he experienced much worse conditions. Often there was nowhere to wash clothes, so they slept in them on the floor. In the dusty rooms, he ate noodles with beans, so it was not such a big problem for him. When he found the shower, he realized there weren't as many people there as he thought. The others seemed uncomfortable. Perhaps they had never been in such conditions before. But one thing was for sure. There were enough people here who were not familiar with such a life, and the need to share something with others. The manager secretly watched them and evaluated each trainee. Soon after, Tony returned to his room and continued reading his books. He noticed that it was already 8:30 in the evening. At that moment, Archie entered the room. Tony did not ask him if he had finished his duties, to which the man replied that he still had things to do. Then he handed him the papers and asked him to fill them out. He said he was asked to hand out these forms to everyone, and then Tony said he would definitely fill it out, and then asked if Archie needed any help. The man waved it off, saying that he was fine, and the guy just needed to go to bed. He still had things to do, but he could handle everything himself. Tony looked at his neighbor with disbelief, but agreed with his decision. After some time, night fell. At 1 o'clock in the morning, Tony woke up from strange sounds. When he opened his eyes, he saw Archie standing in the middle of the room, so he sat up on his bed and asked if he was free now, to which Archie smiled and said that he had more work than he thought, and then asked if he had filled out the form. Tony said he filled it out as soon as he received it, and Archie was very surprised by this answer. The hero looked closely at his neighbor's face and noticed something strange. Archie seemed to be moving more slowly, and for some reason this made Tony feel uneasy. At that moment, Marvin entered their room and called Archie over with a shout. He said he had asked him to bring the forms by 10 p.m. and didn't understand what he was doing in his room now. Archie looked away awkwardly, saying that many people were sleeping now and he couldn't disturb them, so he would collect all the forms tomorrow morning. Marvin yelled at him, asking them if he really wanted to cause him trouble from day one. Then Archie bowed to him and apologized, saying that he would bring everything in tomorrow by 7 a.m. Then Marvin exhaled, saying that for the first time he forgave him and said that he must definitely come to him in the morning. When he left the room, Tony wanted to ask his neighbor if he was okay, but decided that it was not worth doing. He had already asked him twice, and both times Archie had answered that he was fine. He knew that all it took was a few words from him, and then they might be able to get along. The next morning, Tony walked out of his room when suddenly someone called out to him from behind him. It was Marvin. He asked where Archie had gone, but the hero said that he didn't know because he had just woken up. Then Marvin asked to find him. He said that he would be in the small conference room at 7:30, and if Tony saw him, then he should bring Archie there. Then the hero asked the man for his number just in case. After this, the hero thought about the fact that he and Archie had not even exchanged phone numbers. He had no idea that something like this could happen. However, he quickly realized that there was no time for this at all, since Archie had been very busy yesterday. He was distracted from his thoughts by a scream somewhere nearby. The guy immediately ran towards the noise to find out what was going on. As it turned out, something was happening near room B19. One of the men living there was unhappy that Archie gave him the form at 6:30 and asked him to do it by 7 because that was impossible. He was busy with the morning procedures now, and since the man had volunteered to work as a headman, he needed to take control of everything from the very beginning. Archie bowed to him, saying that he would definitely improve, but now he needed a completed questionnaire. After that, he walked away, muttering to himself about how sorry he was. The neighbor of the man who had just yelled at Archie asked if he was being too hard on him. The man said that he should not be pitied because such is the fate of the headman. Whoever is appointed to this role can receive 20 additional points by the end of training. He said that he had read about it in a brochure, but that was the only way to really get points, and if the class monitor couldn't handle it, he could be replaced. He then said that in any case it was not for them to judge his work. The management would deal with it. Tony thought about the fact that it would be beneficial for the company if new employees learned to communicate with each other from the very beginning. As a result, aggression and negativity hung in the air, and the heroes wondered what Archie thought about it. Suddenly, a system window appeared in front of him. It informed him that the guy had a new task. He needed to read the brochure of the company's training center, learn all the information stored there, and be ready for anything. He also needed to lead the team as a headman. He would be able to make a good impression and earn authority. The hero was extremely surprised that the system was asking him to do such a task. Suddenly, he saw Archie in front of him, who was again asking the other interns to give him the completed questionnaire. Then he came up to him and greeted him. Archie asked him what happened. Tony said that the manager was looking for him. He was waiting in the small conference room on the second floor. He asked Archie to come there before 7:30. Archie cursed, realizing that he had 15 minutes left and he still hadn't finished his work. Tony wanted to offer him his help, but Archie had already run ahead down the corridor, saying that he could handle it alone. He then went back to knocking on the doors of other interns to get their completed forms. Archie couldn't understand if he was doing all this for some points, but he realized that if he were in his place, he wouldn't want to share them with others either. But maybe he was just uncomfortable accepting support from others. However, there is a possibility that he is so blinded by the desire to enhance his reputation that he forgets about human relationships, and there was nothing he could do about it. He needed to stop helping others and focus on himself. Then he called Marvin and said that he had found Archie and passed on his words to him. When Marvin realized that they had not yet eaten breakfast, he called him into the conference room and said that they would eat together since they were on the same team. After some time, Tony came to the hall where Marvin was already sitting. He was waiting for Archie with the prepared statements, but he still had not arrived. The hero took a free seat and began to read the brochure. He wondered to himself why Archie had taken on a job he couldn't handle. He should have at least done an interim report. At that moment, the headman entered the room and apologized for being late. He said that some people refused to participate, so he was late. Everyone filled out the form except 11 people. He attached a list of all those who did not do so. Then Marvin yelled at him, asking why everyone else had agreed to participate except them, and said that it was the group leader's problem. He also didn't understand how he could sum up the team's total when 11 people hadn't filled out the application, and he was extremely unhappy that Archie had failed to complete such a simple task. Archie looked down in shame, not knowing what to answer. Then Marvin said that it was late and he should go and eat. Tony was surprised that Archie simply walked away, leaving the manager who was waiting for him and did not start eating. He was quite disappointed with this behavior on Archie's part. As it turned out, Archie noticed that Tony was also in the office, and this fact made him quite angry, so when he left the office, he slammed the door loudly behind him. After Tony read the brochure, he approached Marvin and asked if he had anything else to do since he needed to have breakfast, to which the man replied that he still needed to check the B-team questionnaires. The hero asked him if the other teams filled out these forms. Marvin said that it was mandatory, a form for new employees. Then the hero said that since he had so much work, he could help him. He was sorry that such a situation happened to his team. He said that he had had a big enough dinner yesterday that he didn't need breakfast. Marvin agreed to accept the help, and then Tony said that the forms of Team A and Team C are different, and asked the man which one is the priority, to which Marvin said that it doesn't matter. The problem is that more than a dozen people did not fill out the forms, and this spoils all the statistics. Marvin asked him to research the wording of the team's questionnaires, and he was about to go and get those who had not yet submitted their questionnaires filled out, but at that moment Tony stopped him. He said that they had a list that their head boy had made, so there was no need to go from room to room. It would be easier to just call everyone and let them know that they hadn't submitted the questionnaire yet. It would be much easier that way, and Marvin wouldn't have to work so hard. Sometime after this, interns began to come into the conference room with completed questionnaires. They apologized for bringing the forms in late, while Marvin watched the whole thing with a slight smirk on his face. In the end, they were able to quickly cope with this work, and all thanks to Tony's help. But the hero denied that he made any significant contribution. Moreover, the whole work was delayed precisely because of his team. However, Marvin insisted. He said that the hero even had to skip his breakfast because of this work. Tony said it was okay and pulled a protein bar out of his pocket. He also offered one to Marvin as the snack would give them both strength. He said it was a good alternative to breakfast and he had a ton of those bars in his room. Marvin took the candy bar and said that office work is really fun. There are those who immediately fit into this life, and there are those who find it very difficult. They then walked out of the hall and up the stairs, Marvin saying that despite the number of interviews and tests that potential employees go through, this situation happens every time, although perhaps it is even for the best. This way they were able to filter out one more person. Then he smiled again and said that he had to work in the morning, but he was not even hungry, so he and Tony decided to say goodbye. Finally, Marvin asked him to be sure to bring more of these bars with him, and if he came empty-handed, he would give him a penalty point. After this, the manager said something else to the young intern. Sometime after this, Marvin went to a presentation where he was the leader, and the interns gathered in the room to listen to what he had to say. He asked everyone to remain quiet as there was a lecture for Team B going on right now, so the trainees who were late should return to their team. Then he asked the head man about the evening. He clarified the number of people in case someone suddenly did not come. Archie said that everyone was now in place. Marvin looked at the guy with disbelief and said that in that case they should get started. He invited the interns to learn about the history of the company's origins and development when suddenly Tony entered the room. Everyone present immediately turned their attention to the late intern. The hero awkwardly scratched his head and apologized for being late. Archie was surprised to see that his roommate actually showed up to the conference. When Marvin saw the intern, he smiled warmly at him. Then he extended his hand towards him and asked him to come closer. As Tony approached him, he turned back to the audience, saying that before they continued, he had something to say. He said that Tony would be taking over as head boy from now on and asked if anyone had any objections. The hero himself was extremely surprised by this decision, but the system informed him that he had completed the task and received a reward, 5 points, and the store's reputation was increased to 20. He had a mission to become a head man, but he didn't think that things would turn out like this. He didn't do anything, but he still felt guilty. Archie was clearly unhappy with this decision, but they would have to live in the same room, and so the hero did not know what to do. The lecture was over. Marvin asked everyone to write down their thoughts on a piece of paper about the lecture and give it to him, and the head of Team B would have to bring all the papers to the conference room before lights out. Before the interns left the room, Tony asked them to stay for a minute as he had something to say. He asked everyone to bring their notes to his room before 9:30 in the evening. He also said that he would create a group chat that every intern should join, and he would make all notifications through this chat. All the interns agreed with this, and then Tony suggested that everyone have lunch and rest a little. The only one who was unhappy was Archie. Soon, the hero began to create the very chat he was talking about. He made a note that this chat was only for important messages and suggested that the interns use it only on special occasions. At that moment, Marvin entered the office where he was sitting and asked what he was doing there. Tony said that the cafeteria was crowded, so he decided to talk to the man there. He asked if it wouldn't be better if the team started eating in turns, to which Marvin replied that it was a good idea and they should think about it carefully. He also said that the interns had a lecture in the afternoon, and the lecturer really didn't like phones ringing during his classes, so if they didn't want to get penalized, Tony should warn his team to turn on silent mode. The hero said that he would definitely warn everyone and thank the man for the tip. Marvin smiled, saying that he was doing a great job of taking care of his team members, but he shouldn't forget that he was also an intern. Then he said goodbye to the intern and went about his business. Tony smirked, thinking that he could handle this since he was pretty good at it. He soon returned to his room where he continued his work, noting to himself that with his role as class monitor, he had absolutely no time for anything else. At that moment, Archie entered the room, sat down at the table next to his neighbor, and began to look at him with displeasure. Then he suddenly asked him if he wanted to tell him something. However, when he realized that Tony was silent, he forgot his question again. The hero said that his person in this position was solely the decision of the leader, and he had nothing to do with it, so Archie had no reason to be angry with him. Then Archie suddenly jumped up from his chair and shouted, saying that he knew that he had snitched on him to the boss that morning. However, Tony said that it was not like that at all. The manager was waiting for Archie so that they could work together and then have breakfast, but his neighbor did not believe him. He could not believe that the manager would have breakfast with ordinary interns. He wanted to continue his indignation, but Tony stopped him, saying that he was not at all ready to talk about it now. He said that if Archie wants, he can take back this role, but they only say this when he calms down. After this, the hero left his room despite all the indignation of his neighbor. Soon, he came to the conference room where Marvin and the other executives were already present. At that moment, someone knocked on the door of the office, and Marvin let the person inside. It turned out it was Archie. He said he wanted to change his room. He explained that he couldn't get along with his neighbor under the current circumstances, so Marvin asked him if Tony was really his neighbor. Archie then confirmed that Tony was indeed his roommate and that he wanted to change rooms or wanted Tony to do so. Marvin asked what the reason for this was the whole problem really that he became the team leader. Then Archie said that he was disappointed in the traitor. Even now, Tony came here only to lick the souls of the leader. At that moment, one of the leaders got up from his desk and approached him, trying to calm him down. Marvin was surprised that he called Tony a traitor. Then Archie screamed, saying that stealing someone else's position is real betrayal. He dreamed of this job and tried to prove himself in the role of the head man, but Tony hung around Marvin and took this role for himself. Then the hero got up from his table and went to his neighbor, asking him to calm down and talk about this problem in private. He apologized to the managers and opened the door so that Archie could go out with him, but his neighbor had no intention of going out. He said that he was currently talking to the manager. Then Marvin stood up from his desk and asked Tony to stay. He said that Archie had actually reached out to him. He smirked, saying that in that case they really should talk, but he himself had practically nothing to say. He suggested that they start by telling Archie the reason why he was replaced. Yesterday, Marvin told me to collect the questionnaires before 10 p.m. and bring them to him. And even though Archie hadn't managed to get the job done by that time, Marvin offered him to do it all before 7 a.m., but Archie couldn't handle that either. Then the manager gave him another 30 minutes, but even that didn't help him. Archie tried to justify himself by saying that he had brought them anyway, but Marvin insisted. He said that there were those who had not submitted the forms. And even if we take into account that some people are not so easy to get to cooperate, Archie could have compiled at least minimal statistics, but instead he only brought a list of those who did not submit the questionnaires, and such a person cannot lead a team. This was his first job as a headman, but he couldn't even cope with it. So Marvin couldn't allow someone like him to take over the position. At this point, the other executives approached him and tried to calm him down, since he had already crossed the line. But Marvin said that he would not tolerate this, since Archie did not even think about his mistakes, but blamed everything on Tony. Then he told him that while he was calling his neighbor a traitor, he was trying in every way to protect him. The day Tony shared the candy bar with Marvin, he asked for Archie to be given another chance. Marvin said that he kept asking for a chance until the very end and supported him until the very end. He also recalled a moment at a conference when he asked Archie if everyone was present in the room, to which he replied that no one was absent. However, Marvin himself knew perfectly well that Tony was not in the office at that moment. Then he yelled at Archie again, saying that if he had been honest, he would have stayed on the job, but he had screwed up, and even if he fell at his feet and begged for forgiveness, it wouldn't be enough. He said that Archie doesn't even realize what a wonderful person he shares a room with. Archie and Tony looked at the manager in shock, not knowing what to say. Then Marvin approached Archie and asked if he still wanted to change his room, because since he had come to ask him to continue, he would listen to him. He said that the trainee had until tomorrow's lunch to pack his things as he was leaving the training center and heading home. After that, Archie and Tony left the office. The hero turned to his neighbor, saying that this is exactly what he was talking about. He should learn to listen to others. The manager needs to calm down, and therefore Archie should go to him after dinner and apologize. He said that the leader is also a human being and he just needs to cool down a bit. Then suddenly Archie stopped and apologized to his neighbor. He took a deep breath and then thanked Tony. Tony said that it was just advice from the team leader. Even though there was an age difference between them, they were all interns here. So he wanted Archie to treat him as a colleague from now on. As evening fell, he gathered his team at the entrance to the training center, apologizing for calling them so early in the afternoon. He asked them if anyone was familiar with Il-sung group gymnastics. At this point, there was a deathly silence. Apparently, none of the interns heard about this. Then Tony said that as soon as he read the company brochure, he realized that this was a very important thing. Of the 1,000 points that trainees can earn during their training, 50 can only be earned in one way. Teams A, B, and C compete with each other, and those who show the best results will receive 50 points. He reminded them again that only the best interns had the opportunity to choose their own occupation, so it would be a good idea for them to practice so that their team could win. Luckily, Tony himself knows gymnastics and can record a video for them, so he asked his team to spend some time after dinner doing it. As the team leader, he promised to strive to ensure that his team had the best. He apologized to the interns again for keeping them late and asked them to come by 9:30 and not to forget about the reports they needed to prepare. When the interns left, they started discussing the meeting with each other. They thought that they would only get 50 points if they were very lucky, but most agreed that they had chosen a great class monitor this time. When Tony heard this, he smiled warmly, mentally thanking the boys for following him. However, he suddenly realized that he had already been delayed quite a bit, and so he ran inside the building. There was only one person left standing on the street, and that was Archie. Even though he had apologized to his neighbor a few hours ago, he looked extremely unhappy again. Soon the hero came to the office where Marvin was supposed to be, but he did not see the man inside. When he peered deeper into the office, he saw that Marvin was there after all, squatting with his colleague and looking at something. Tony immediately realized that it was a broadcast amplifier, so he asked the man to let him look at it. He also gave him the sheets of paper that he was supposed to collect from his group. He said that after the last lesson, when the former class monitor was late, the rest of the trainees did everything fairly quickly, but 2 people still hadn't turned in their forms. After a few moments, Tony said that he had it all figured out, which surprised the other men since they had no idea what to do with the thing. Then Marvin decided to try speaking loudly and made a test message. He turned to the 2 who had not yet submitted their forms and asked them to bring them to the small conference room. After this, the interns, who still had not managed to submit their questionnaires, immediately ran towards the required hall. As soon as they got there, they apologized for being late and handed over their questionnaires. Tony thanked them for their cooperation and asked if they had heard the alerts, to which the boys replied in the affirmative. Marvin's colleague, Connor, asked where he found the guy, to which Marvin grinned slyly and said that he had his eye on him and was not going to give him to anyone. Then the hero asked Marvin to allow him to make one more announcement. He addressed the trainees from his team, saying that he was waiting for everyone for evening gymnastics in the training center gym. Soon evening came and Tony went to the appointed place. Only 5 people came to the gymnastics. The hero expected that more people would hear his message on the loudspeaker, but decided to accept the number he already had. Then the interns asked how he knew about Il-sung Group Gymnastics, to which the hero replied that he had worked at a construction site long before coming here. This construction site belonged to this very company. Soon he decided to start the gymnastics. He said that first he would show them, and then they would all learn the movement together. First they needed to warm up well so that no one would get injured. Marvin watched all this closely. He noted that he likes Tony's approach. He doesn't fuss and does everything gradually. Marlon never thought that there would be someone so capable in this training center, so he decided to tell everyone about this guy. After that, he decided to continue watching the interns work. He silently hoped that Tony would decide to go into the sales department after training, since such a specialist would be worth his weight in gold to them. Late in the evening, Tony went to the men's shower. He was very exhausted after the grueling gymnastics. He understood that the main thing was not to be greedy with the class monitor's points. He needed to ask other interns for help more often. After he took a shower, he headed to his room. However, he heard his roommate talking to his mother, who was very eager to visit him. The hero decided not to distract Archie from the conversation and simply silently left the room. As it turned out, Archie complained to his mother that he had been removed from his post as head man, which the woman was extremely unhappy about and wanted to come to the company and personally scold everyone. Tony walked out the door of his room and sat on the floor, dialing someone's number on his phone. As it turned out, he decided to call his mother and ask how her treatment was going. He then asked if Uncle Hank had come to see her, and when he realized that the man was still in his mother's room, he asked to speak to him and thanked the doctor for looking after her. When everyone had finished talking on the phone with their families, Tony returned to his room and lay down on his bed. He decided to check the chat he had created and realized that everyone in it was very pleased with the head man and his work. He thanked all the interns for their kind words and said that they should continue to work hard in the future. After this, the hero suddenly fell asleep. However, in the middle of the night, he was awakened by a strange glow. As it turned out, the system sent him a notification again. It said that the official joining date would be June 1st. Tony would start receiving a salary from tomorrow since he got a job. Tony still couldn't believe that he was really a new employee. Then the system told him that he had a new task. He needed to improve his vision to increase his advantage. The hero was quite worried, but still decided to accept this task. The system gave him a gaze enhancement skill that he could use 10 times, but Tony didn't even understand how to use this thing. The system told him that he just needed to mentally pronounce the name of the product and the word use, and then a bottle of purple liquid suddenly flew out of the system window. The hero was extremely surprised by what was happening, but he extended his hand and took the bottle. At that moment, Archie woke up from strange sounds. He immediately got angry and yelled at Tony to let him sleep. After this, the hero fell asleep. But 5 minutes before 6 a.m., he got out of his bed and left the room. Outside the door, 2 interns who had been on duty that night were already waiting for him. He asked how the shift had gone, because he had heard that it was quite chilly here in the morning. Then he asked the guys to open the windows and go and rest, and he would take care of everything else. When it was his turn, he decided it would be better to check that there were no problems anywhere. He then decided to activate his skill, and at that moment his eyes turned purple. In the morning, there was another conference. One of the leaders said that this Friday the interns will know their midterm grades. This will affect the distribution after the training center. Many factors affect their grades, so he asked the guys to work hard. Tony decided that now was the perfect time to use his skill. He checked everything he could, and if the activity is analyzed properly, then the assessments will not be a problem. Soon after, his team gathered on the court to practice gymnastics. The woman who taught the trainees gymnastics was surprised that Team B was so good at gymnastics, especially the 6 people standing in front of everyone else. If this continues in the same spirit, then they will get extra points. She said that she would personally give top marks to these 6 because they worked so hard. Tony thanked his guys for their work, saying that they did a great job. Soon after, the hero went to the office to prepare for a test. In order to get into the department he wants, he needs perfect grades. His partners were extremely tired, but Tony continued to study endlessly. Soon after, the trainees from Group B began to come to the office and also wanted to practice with their leader. On Friday, the midterm test came. Marvin said that the trainees must show all their skills in this test. The interns who were on Team B immediately realized that the test would be very easy for them. Tony also had no problem solving the test. Soon, the results of the testing were posted on one of the stands, and the trainees were a little excited. As it turned out, Tony came first. When he turned back, he saw Archie standing behind him, looking extremely depressed. Then the hero decided to find his name on the list, because this guy studied so hard, and he could not believe that he could have a bad grade. As it turned out, he was practically at the very bottom of the list. Tony had heard that he had good results, and therefore could not understand how he could be so low. However, he quickly came to the conclusion that Archie's assessment was not his problem. At that moment, the guys from his group approached him. They were proud that their leader was in first place. The intern said that they too had made it into the top 10 thanks to their wonderful headman, but Tony said that it was all their merit, and they didn't need to thank him. He then reminded one of the interns, Josh, that it was his turn to be on duty today, so he should get a good night's sleep now. As Tony walked down the hallway, he thought that the test task prepared by the manager was quite good. He expected that he could take first place just by using the skill. However, he did not think that the result depended on public display, because it could become a problem for him. At that moment, a girl with short dark hair appeared behind Tony. She was trying to make sure that it was really Tony standing in front of her. She reflected that he had looked a little different when she was younger, but decided she would find out later. As Tony headed to his room, the system appeared in front of him again. She told him something that greatly interested the hero. When he entered the room, Archie was already sitting inside, looking extremely depressed. At first, Tony didn't pay attention to it, but he felt a strange feeling in the atmosphere. He then turned to Archie and said he was going to bed, to which his roommate asked him if he was pleased with himself. Tony didn't understand what he was asking, so Archie repeated his question. The hero looked at his neighbor with displeasure, realizing that now he would again begin to blame him for his troubles. However, Archie seemed to genuinely believe that Tony was to blame for his failures. Then the hero sighed with displeasure and said that they had agreed that they would not quarrel anymore, so he would pretend that he had not heard anything. At that moment, Archie got up from his bed and demonstratively apologized to him. He then angrily asked him if he had even had to apologize. He approached him and said that in that case he would repeat his words in a more polite manner. He said that it wasn't enough for Tony to steal his post. He also decided to grab the first place in the ranking for himself. The hero countered by saying that his grades were at the bottom. Archie had the worst score on their team, but Tony in his place had nothing to do with it. Archie said that this wouldn't have happened if he had remained a prefect, and maybe he was only at the bottom because the leaders were unhappy with him. Then he suddenly shouted, saying that the leader was blind. He turned to Tony without asking what his relationship was with him. He assumed they were friends or something, since he personally appointed him as the team leader. He then suggested that Tony simply gave him the money. The hero was so shocked by his words that he asked him to stop talking such nonsense. When Archie tried to point his finger at him again, they suddenly put out their hand and hit Archie on the arm. He asked how much longer he was going to slander him, and then added that he had nothing to do with any personal relationships or bribes, and if he was accused, he would like to see evidence. Then Archie suddenly grabbed his hand, saying that Tony had just hit him. He hunched over, pretending to be in great pain, and began screaming throughout the room. He then fell to the floor and began rolling around, talking about how much pain he was in. Tony closed his eyes in displeasure, saying that he was patient, but there was a limit to everything. Then Archie stood up and asked him again if he had just told him that he had crossed the line. He again blamed Tony for being at the bottom. The hero tried to object, saying that he had nothing to do with it. Then Archie yelled at him, telling him that he was a real freak and now he had a chance to get kicked out of here because of him. Then he suddenly started shouting, saying that he was not going to give up just like that. After that, he started screaming again, saying that Tony was beating him. Not wanting to listen to this nonsense any longer, the hero left the academic building. He sat down on one of the benches and decided to listen to music. However, he was in a very bad mood, so he soon removed the headphones and remained sitting in silence. At that moment, an unfamiliar woman in a business suit approached him and asked if he was that very Tony. The hero looked at the woman and asked who she was. The girl bared her teeth, saying that he was being rather insolent. However, the hero still did not understand what she meant. Then the girl asked him if he had bribed the leader Marvin. She asked if he was really so eager to get the position of headman. When the hero realized why she was getting at it, he immediately got up from the bench and said that he didn't know where she heard this nonsense, but he doesn't do such things. The girl then said that she had a suspicion that the director, Marvin, had rigged the test results. Tony just walked past her indifferently, saying that he understood where this situation was coming from. He assumed that this woman was related to Archie. Then the woman threatened him. She told him to be careful with his words because she could make him fly out of the training center. Tony said that it was an interim test for employees. The manager had no reason to influence the results because he was loyal to the company. Then the girl said that something like this could harm the Elsung Group company, and they also had circumstantial evidence, and maybe it was just a hoax, but it could lead to serious consequences. She asked how she could be kind to Tony in such a situation. The guy then turned to her and said that he didn't know who she was, but he wanted her to stop attacking him. The girl said that he, like no one else, knows what an attack is. Then Tony asked what the manager had to do with it, because if he correctly understood the reason for her complaints, then he had nothing to do with it. The rigging of the results and the beating of Archie are just his sick inventions. All of this is obviously complete nonsense, for which there is not the slightest evidence. He was more than sure that they had no good reason to accuse him of this lie. Then the girl screamed at him, saying that she could easily make him fly out of the center without even saying a word. She said that Tony himself was to blame for getting involved in all this. Trying to remain honest, he was very inconsiderate. And even if this whole situation is just a rumor, no one will believe him, since everyone knows what Archie's parents are up to. A guy with no money and no experience shouldn't get involved with someone who has plenty of both, so she has every reason to blame Tony. The hero repeated, saying that he had no problem with information leakage, and the result of the midterm assessment was just an assessment of their abilities. They have no connection with the manager Marvin. They first met at the training center, and as for the bribe, he simply doesn't have the money. He barely received a diploma in credit and banking. He asked if someone with his education couldn't get better grades, and if he was just studying hard and improving his skills, why would he bribe someone? And if a woman talks so often about bribes and leaks, it turns out that only people who do this can stay in the company. In that case, he shouldn't stay here since everyone here allows themselves to throw mud at each other. He said he would give up his dream and then walked away, saying he was tired of this conversation. The girl shouted after him not to dare leave and then asked if he knew who she was. At that moment, a black car drove up to the training center. A woman in a long orange dress came out from there and started screaming that her son had been beaten and no one had done anything, and that unfamiliar woman immediately ran up to her. She took the woman by the arm and asked her to think about her reputation, but the woman in the dress insisted on showing her the freak who beat up her son. And she asked her subordinate to take care of her dear son, but the dark-haired woman insisted that she not shout here, because this was a training center. Tony immediately realized what was going on. The dark-haired woman glared at him. Tony paused, wondering what kind of sick family had fallen on his head. Meanwhile, Marvin was resting after an incredibly hard day at work. At that moment, Tony walked past his office and stopped because he noticed that the manager looked rather miserable. Seeing a large suitcase next to his desk, he asked if he was going somewhere. Marvin said that there was a disciplinary committee meeting coming up, and it turned out that Archie's father was a member of parliament, so he had no choice but to go home. Tony assumed it was because Marvin had given him a perfect score on the test, but the manager said that had nothing to do with it. He said it was a fair assessment of each team, and it just so happened that Tony earned the most points, which is why he came in first place. However, the hero noticed that the man's suitcase was quite large, so he had only one conclusion. Marvin said it was like trying to put out a fire with straw. No matter how hard you try, nothing will change. Sometimes things don't go the way they want them to. This bastard's father screwed everything up and they can't fix it. They'll either cut his salary or just transfer him to a smaller office. Then he suddenly burst into tears, saying that now it would not be easy for Tony and even Archie. Because of those, they had to keep a close eye on him. Marvin was upset that he had done poorly, and it pained Tony to watch him suffer. He said that a company employee must be strong-willed because they are innocent and nothing else matters. But Marvin said that their innocence does not benefit them because their opponent is the son of a member of parliament. Then he asked if Tony was up to something. The guy said he had a plan all along, he just needed to muster the courage. Then he remembered the day when one of the interns on his team, Josh, went to bed to go on night duty. After that, the hero walked down the corridor thinking about the test. As he approached his room, the system sent him a notification. When he turned around, he saw that the system was asking him whether he could drag others into trouble for their own good. It was quite a difficult choice for the hero, but the system said that his choice would determine the future, so he should think it over carefully. After a while, Tony and Martha went into the small conference room. The meeting was held so late because they had a problem with information leaks, as well as suspicions of bribery and even violence. Philip said that this was the first time something like this had happened since the training center was established. That same woman with glasses said that everything was as the director said, because such incidents are simply outrageous. She introduced herself as Anna, the general manager of new employee training, and decided to make a statement. She asked for the dismissal and disciplinary action against Team B's leader, Marvin. She also demanded that the new employee, Tony, who was undergoing training, be expelled and that they leave the training center. Then Archie's mother intervened, saying that she had failed to mention that her son had been abused, which was the main point of their discussion. She then leaned over to Archie and stroked his cheek, saying that no one had the right to behave like that with a child. She then turned to the directors, saying that violence was a serious matter, and if they did not make the right decision, she would make such a fuss that the whole country would know about it. Philip said that as the director of this training center, he is responsible for the well-being of all trainees, so he will listen to both sides and then analyze the evidence and make his decision. He said that if they were not satisfied with something in his judgment or had objections to the decision he had made, then the parties should speak out right now. Archie and his representatives said they had no objections. Marvin and Tony exchanged glances. They then stated that they had no objections either. Philip then read out a statement from Archie, in which he said that Team B's leader, Marvin, had provided Tony with the assessment test questions, and he then asked if the party had any evidence. Archie said that all the staff at the training center have first-class education, but none of the B team, including him, have a perfect score, and only one person in the B team got a high score. He then pointed out, without saying anything, that he had never even gone to university, and therefore could not possibly have passed the test with flying colors. Philip then said that Archie's statement was circumstantial evidence based on speculation. Archie was very unhappy with this answer. Then Philip said that they needed to look into the second issue. Archie blamed the B team leader, Marvin, and the intern, Tony, for the fact that the grade was given unfairly since there was some kind of relationship between them, and for the same reason, Archie was stripped of his position as team leader. The chief said he also believed the evidence presented here was only circumstantial. Archie had no choice but to agree with this. The manager was tired and sighed, realizing that there was nothing significant here either. However, even if these accusations are circumstantial, these are reasonable doubts, and then he asked if Marvin had a refutation, because otherwise he will have no choice but to accept Archie's statement. Then he turned to his colleague, and he completely agreed with him. Philip said that they had heard Archie's statement, and now he wanted to hear Marvin. He asked if he had any evidence to refute his words. However, Marvin stood up and said that he had nothing to say. He had no evidence to contradict it. Philip sighed and continued to look over the statement. The manager then turned to Tony, asking if he had any evidence to contradict this. However, to the surprise of everyone present, the hero said that he had nothing. Philip asked if he should accept Archie's statement. Then Tony stood up, saying that there was someone outside who could testify to his innocence. He hoped that the manager would allow this man to enter. Archie, his mother, and Anna were extremely surprised that a witness was found. Tony remembered the evening when Archie's mother first came to the training center. As they passed him, the system appeared in front of him again. She stated that Tony would not be able to escape the crisis, but he was not alone in this world. He had a close colleague. The system said that in human relationships, it is customary to take and give, but such relationships are based on trust. First, you need to extend your hand, and the more trust there is, the more generous the rewards will be. So she asked Tony to ask others for help, and if these are his true friends, then they will help him. Then the hero decided to write to the guys from his team, hoping to find someone who could help him, but he soon realized that he did not have many people who were ready to stand up for him. There were some people who were willing to help their elder, for which Tony thanked them heartily. After that, he headed forward down the corridor. At that moment, he saw Marvin sitting in the office next to the suitcase. So now, being in the debate room, he asked again if his witness could come in here to say a few words. Philip did not object and allowed the man to enter. At that moment, the door opened and the man who entered greeted everyone present. He introduced himself as Josh from Team B. He said he had proof that Tony knew the test results in advance, so Josh said that first, they would need Team B's assessment test and the OCR cards. Then Philip asked Connor to bring these cards here. Soon, test sheets and cards of 5 people appeared on the table, studying the material together with the team leader. Then Philip asked Josh to explain where the evidence was. Josh said that every night the 5 of them studied together with the head boy, Tony. Unfortunately, with the exception of the head boy, all 5 of them answered one question incorrectly. Then Philip asked, in that case, shouldn't he worry even more about information leakage? Josh said that if all 5 of them had the same mistake, then their suspicions were justified, but they answered different questions incorrectly. Connor said that if that was the case, then it would seem that they had deliberately made mistakes in various matters. Josh then suggested that the executives look at another paper, a list of people who had answered 3 or fewer questions incorrectly on the assessment test. To prove their innocence, they got all the signatures. Then Philip said he would check it out. He asked if there were really that many who had 3 mistakes or less. Josh said that this is true. He thinks that the problem is not in the information leak, but in the difficulty of the test, because it turned out to be too easy. The leader of Team B is less educated than everyone here, and that's true. But even with the company's difficult recruitment process, he was able to get here thanks to his talent. Even when they studied at night, he studied harder than the others, and given the low difficulty of the test, Josh didn't think that getting a perfect score was an impossible task. Philip had no choice but to agree with his words. In this case, it turned out that the head of Team B scored the maximum points on his own. Philip said it was obvious. Tony was a perfect prefect and a great intern. He tried his best every day. He is always actively involved in the life of the whole team, and the idea to prepare the material and shoot a video with gymnastics came from him, and it was this idea that brought their team a lot of extra points. Josh knew his words were just a subjective assessment based on his opinion, but he suggested that the managers sit down themselves. Was a person like Tony really not worthy of receiving the highest score? He said that the head man was talented and smart, and that was a good reason to suspect him of having a special relationship with the team leader. At that moment, the system informed Tony that he was cleared of suspicion. The other interns who had volunteered to help their head man waited impatiently outside the door, trying to eavesdrop on what was going on inside. At that moment, Josh came out of the office. As soon as the door closed behind him, he immediately loosened his tie, saying that he thought he would die of excitement. Meanwhile, Philip said that after Archie's circumstantial evidence, Josh's words seemed more convincing to him, and Connor agreed with him. The manager said that they would accept the response of team leader Marvin and intern Tony on the issue of bribery and information leakage. He said that Marvin and Tony were declared innocent. As he said at the beginning of the objections to his decision, he will not accept. Then Archie's mother slammed her palm down on the table. She asked if they all thought her son had lied to her. She said she wasn't going to give up and could accept that this stupid guy had beaten her son and gotten the highest score. However, she wanted to clarify the issue of him hitting Archie. Marvin realized he was starting to get angry. Then he suddenly got up from the table saying that this mother was taking too much liberty with herself. Tony tried to calm him down, but Marvin said he had something to fight for. He asked if Tony really beat Archie, to which the hero replied that this did not happen. However, he again asked the manager to sit down and calm down. Marvin had no choice but to comply and sit back at his desk. Seeing this, Archie and his mother grinned contentedly. Then Tony decided to turn to Director Philip. He said he had a refutation about the violence. He remembered again that day when the system offered him a choice. She told him to turn on the voice recording function on his phone and leave it active for an hour. After that, he entered the room where Archie was sitting. As it turned out, he recorded their entire argument on a dictaphone. He brought this recording into the discussion room. It was clear from the recording that Archie had made up the story that he had been beaten. Everyone heard him screaming that Tony was beating him, but no beating took place. Marvin couldn't believe his ears. When Archie realized the situation he had gotten himself into, he gritted his teeth in anger. Anna and Archie's mother didn't know how to react to the audio recording. The director and his colleague looked extremely worried. Tony said the audio recording was 10 minutes long. Archie's mother looked at her son with displeasure, who didn't know how to behave. Tony then said that Archie's father was in Parliament and it would be very bad if the tape became public. Then he said that Archie should admit he was wrong and leave the training center, and in that case, he would erase all the files. He said that Archie had made 3 false accusations against him, but even so, he wanted to give him a chance to admit his mistakes. Tony had no intention of making any absurd requests or counter-accusations, and thanked everyone present for listening to him. Philip said that if he decided to determine such a punishment for him, then he allows it. Archie's mother immediately stood up from her chair and began hitting her son on the back of the head. Anna watched everything that was happening in bewilderment, realizing that she had lost. When this whole situation was over, Archie and his mother drove away in a car. At that moment, someone came out of the training center and called out to Anna. When the girl turned around, she saw Marvin. He had a sly grin on his face. He asked what just happened, because he would never have thought that she could grovel in front of someone like that. He asked why the director decided to turn a blind eye to this. He assumed that Archie's mother had promised to buy her a house or a car. Then Anna said that it was all too complicated and he wouldn't understand it, but Marvin continued to mock her, saying that she probably didn't feel very good about losing to worthless people like them. Anna asked if he was trying to slander her. Then Marvin grinned and took his phone out of his pocket, turning on the audio recording. It was recorded on the day Anna met Tony in the courtyard of the training center. The girl immediately demanded that the man turn off the audio recording. Marvin asked if she was in the mood to talk now. Then Anna asked what he wanted. Marvin said that she should fulfill Tony's request and disappear from here. She had to come up with her own reason for why she decided to leave here. Anna demanded that he give her all the records and only then would she leave. Marvin said he wasn't as skilled at intrigue as she was, so he needed confidence. He suggested that she call HR herself, or he would do it himself, and only after that he would delete the audio recording. Anna swore at him. She didn't expect him to do that to her. Then the man said that in that case he had no choice but to report it to management. However, the girl suddenly stopped him. She took a phone out of her pocket and dialed someone's number. She called her boss, apologizing for disturbing him at such a late hour. She apologized and said that she was very sorry, but she would have to leave her job. After this, Marvin smirked and deleted all the audio recordings from his phone. Anna apologized to the director again and said that the reasons for her dismissal were personal. The next morning, Tony could barely open his eyes. All these proceedings completely exhausted him. However, after some time, he still gathered all his strength and went to the first floor. The bus was supposed to be boarding now, and he was supposed to be leading his group. He went into the yard, saying that there were 15 minutes left before the tour of the El Sung Group plant. The journey would take 1 hour and 40 minutes, so he asked everyone to go to the toilet in advance. He said that Team B should go to the third bus. At that moment, a girl with a short haircut approached him. She extended her hand to him, asking if he was the same B team leader, Tony. The hero's cheeks turned red, and he said that it really was him. The girl asked why he wouldn't shake her hand, and then Tony fussed, wiping his palms on his suit, saying that his hands were dirty and so he wanted to wipe them first. After that, he timidly shook the girl's hand, asking who she was, since he was seeing her for the first time, to which the girl replied that her name was Samantha. She said that as of this week she was leading the C team, so Tony asked her what happened to the one who was in that position before her. Samantha said that initially they switched every week and was surprised that things were different in Team B. However, Tony said that this is not entirely true. Then the girl suddenly laughed sweetly. She asked how long he would hold her hand. Tony laughed awkwardly and let go of his hand, saying that he would remember that the girl's name was Samantha. The girl was surprised that he didn't remember her and wondered to herself if this was really the same Tony. The hero said that the girl came in second on the midterm test, and that was amazing. Samantha then asked if he was stumbling on purpose. Tony scratched the back of his head awkwardly, saying that he was a little nervous and couldn't put two words together. However, Samantha apologized, saying that she had been too pushy, and added that if Tony, like her, decided to apply for the strategic planning department, they would see each other quite often, so she decided to get to know him in advance. The hero was surprised to hear about the strategic planning department. At this point, the system told him that this department is the brain of the company, determines its future and important moments, therefore it is considered key. The expected profit in this department can be calculated to infinity. Tony was extremely surprised that in this department one could earn practically endless income. When Samantha saw him looking somewhere behind her, she turned around, thinking that someone was standing behind her. She then turned back to the man, saying that they had the weekend tomorrow so they could have dinner in the town near the training center. She asked if it would be too much of a burden for Tony. She said she had some ideas about developing a strategy together for studying at the training center. To get into the strategic planning department, you need to be in the top 5 in grades. She asked the man to think about it and hoped that he could spare some time for her. Then she handed him a piece of paper with her phone number written on it. She said that for those who aspire to get into the best department, there was nothing wrong with exchanging information, and Tony thanked her for this. She then said that it was time to board, so she needed to take care of her team. Tony said sheepishly that he had to go too. When the girl left, he continued to look after her. Samantha turned around and said that it didn't matter what her colleagues were doing now, because their alliance was above all else. Tony smiled at her and pressed the piece of paper with her phone number to his chest. At that moment, a man looked out from behind a nearby bus, watching Tony and Samantha's conversation. As he looked after the girls, his cheeks turned red. When Tony returned to his room, he began to reflect on the fact that Samantha's intentions did not seem to be the purest. However, he did not understand why she decided to contact him. He was very worried about this whole situation. Meanwhile, Samantha went to the board where the test results were posted. She noticed something strange. Tony's name was both at the beginning and at the end of the list. She couldn't understand why a person with the same name scored different numbers of points. The only information she had was that the grandson of the El Sung Group chairman, Tony, was in the training center. However, she realized that she did not have enough information, and she needed to study this situation better. Still, she decided she'd learned enough and wondered if the company had pushed the chairman's grandson to the back burner. In the evening, Tony did not put on casual clothes and went to room B20. He opened the door, asking what he needed because he had already said that he had the weekend and was not going anywhere. However, Tony still came out and went outside. Josh asked him if he was really inviting him to dinner. However, the hero remained silent, which made Josh very wary. Meanwhile, Tony was wondering what Samantha's real goal was. The girl herself said that she was too persistent, since she decided to get to know him in advance. Tony knew he should aim for the strategic planning department, but he didn't understand why Samantha had chosen him as a partner because they had finished first. He remembered her words about how their alliance would come first. The hero decided that it was too early to show that he suspected her of something. He wondered if she was trying to beat him to get ahead. However, she could also regard him as an outside observer. This girl was smart and quite impressive. All this time, Josh did not understand what was happening. He asked the headman why he was behaving so strangely. When he still didn't get an answer from him, he suddenly ran up to Tony and grabbed him by the neck, starting to laugh and asking how long he would ignore him. When the guys finally spoke to each other, Tony asked what he had been thinking about all this time. As it turned out, the headman didn't even notice that he was ignoring the guy. He said that Samantha invited him to dinner. Josh was extremely surprised because Samantha was the new head of Team C. She was the same girl who took second place in the midterm test. Tony noted that the guy was talking about her too enthusiastically. Josh suddenly hesitated and asked Tony why he was looking at him like that, because everyone knew that this girl was called the goddess of the training center interns. As it turned out, she had been called that since the very beginning of her stay here. When Josh started praising her too much, Tony asked him to stop. Then Josh asked him when they were meeting. Tony said that their meeting would take place at his place right now, and then thoughts began to come into Josh's head about Tony taking first place, Samantha taking second place, and he taking third place. Then he asked if it was all due to a strange coincidence. Tony said it was not a coincidence, but an alliance. He asked Josh if he had thought about joining the strategic planning department. Josh asked why he was asking him the question so suddenly. Was the strategic planning department the main purpose of this dinner? Tony then said that Samantha had originally planned to meet only with him, but he didn't really want to, so he asked Josh to join. Josh is also at the top of the list, so he decided to invite him. He apologized for not telling him straight away, but Josh said it was okay. He said that this had been his goal since he entered university. Tony chuckled, realizing that he had actually just made that up. Meanwhile, Samantha was already waiting for Tony near the entrance to the cafe. She was a little upset that he was late. Soon, she saw Tony coming around the corner. She was delighted and immediately wanted to get up and go meet him. However, a moment later, another guy came out after him, whom she saw for the first time. This circumstance upset her quite a lot. Tony greeted her, but Samantha said she thought Tony would come alone. The hero said that he thought that Samantha would not come alone. Soon, all three went to a cafe and ordered food. Tony didn't understand what was happening or what Samantha was thinking. Then the hero turned to her, saying that having dinner with her was a great honor for him. The girl said that his feelings were mutual. She said she was very glad to meet such a talented man, and it was a pity that they were having dinner in such an inconspicuous place. She thought Tony had never eaten anything like it. Tony and Josh were surprised by her words. The hero looked closely at the girl, trying to understand what she meant. Samantha said slightly indignantly that they had placed first and third on the midterm test, and that was amazing. Tony didn't say that they tried very hard. She herself took second place, and that was also a very decent result. However, Samantha didn't answer. She just continued to eat her food in silence. Soon it was late evening and all three left the cafe. Samantha said that Tony's team seemed to have become a family, and that Team C had already earned a reputation. Despite the incident that happened last night, the trainees don't know everything. And this isn't just one incident. She remembered a video of some guy recording gymnastics for a team. People were saying he had been doing great from day one. There were 5 people in the video. This made the training director very angry, so Samantha asked if Tony knew that the entire C team treated him like an upstart because none of them thought to film the gymnastics first. As a result, each member of Team C had a quarter point deducted from their rating, so they decided to change their class monitor. Tony said he was sorry, but Samantha said he was the reason she got the job. Josh then asked if this meeting was really designed to survey competitors and remove obstacles to the strategic planning owners. Tony tried to stop him, but the girl said that she had nothing to hide and added that there was some truth in it. She wondered what someone who could beat her on the test would be like and wanted to meet that person in person. Then she heard again about the night incident involving him, and she became even more interested. Her desire to find out from Tony only grew. That was her motive. She was serious about getting into the strategic planning department, and she was curious what the guys thought about it. Tony said he hasn't decided anything for sure yet. He's just doing the best he can day by day. The girl said it was a bit disappointing because everyone was doing their best. Besides, she didn't understand where else Tony could aspire to, if not to the strategic planning department. She asked him to think about it since she didn't know what the others were hoping for, but she could understand him. Then Samantha thought about how it would be nice if there was a way to be sure of getting into the top 5. Tony said he wasn't sure if that was possible, and even if it was, wouldn't it be better to give it to someone from Team C? Then Josh suddenly intervened in the conversation. He said that, in fact, Tony also wanted to join the strategic planning department. He had been thinking about this idea for a long time, and he even had some suggestions. Samantha said that was good, but he should talk about it himself. Because if he's not interested in the strategic planning department, then their meeting was in vain. Tony asked her if she meant that only those in the top 5 would be able to get into strategic planning, to which Samantha replied in the affirmative. George then said that with the team and Samantha, there were 6 of them, but if only those at the top had a chance, then no one else had a chance to join. The girl said that not all of them would be able to do it. After all, they were rivals. Josh didn't understand what she was talking about, so Tony explained to him that she wanted them to separate. Samantha offered to conduct negotiations at her place. As a former cheerleader, she has certain advantages in mass games. Her leader also said that she will become a female commander. The maximum number of points that can be scored is 150. If a person acts as a female or male commander, he will be awarded an additional 50, so she set herself the first place with the help of bonus points. She said that she would give Tony the position of male commander, and in the future, this would help him strengthen his position as the best trainee. Then the hero asked what she wanted in return, offering this, because in any case, she would take first place if he did not become the commander. Then the girl took a sip from her glass. She then said that she wanted to join them and asked to be accepted as a member. Tony was extremely surprised that she wanted to be part of their team. If you think about it, everyone in the top 6 are members of their group except for the trainee in second place. Then Tony guessed that she actually wanted to keep an eye on them. Personally, he didn't care whether she joined or not, but he had to know how others would react to it. He said he would ask the group members what they thought about it, since he was not the only one making such a decision. Then they promised to contact each other a little later. When Tony returned back to the training center, he informed his trainee about who wanted to join the group. He said it was Team C's leader, Samantha. One of the interns was extremely happy with this news and said that he definitely agreed. The girl was also very happy, saying that Samantha is the goddess of the training center's interns. The man supported her, saying that she got everything, both intelligence and beauty. He asked where she was now and asked to bring her to them right now. However, Tony stopped him, saying that she would not join them just like that. She would make him a male commander in the mass games. Then one of the trainees said that it didn't matter, because she herself asked to join their group, and she was very envious of her beauty and femininity. The other girls also agreed with her. So the whole team agreed that Samantha would join them. Tony thought their reaction was an order of magnitude better than he expected. Soon, the clock struck 10 o'clock in the evening. Active negotiations were in full swing within the training team. At that moment, Samantha entered the office and greeted everyone present. She said that she was going to join their group. The hero noted that it was surprising that she came so quickly. The other interns immediately ran up to the girl and began asking her about various things. Time flew by quickly. A whole week has passed since then. One of the interns asked if Samantha had finished her business, but the girl said that she was more interested in other things. She asked if Tony wasn't an amazing person. He explains only the most important points. Sometimes it is not so easy to understand them yourself. She thought to herself that he was talking about what was necessary, as if he had learned everything in advance. This was impossible unless he was the director's grandson. A few days later, the test results were posted in the hallway again, and Tony was in first place again. However, he noticed that one of his interns was no longer at the top. The guy said that he tried his best. Then Tony asked him to work harder next time since they were in the same study group. The guy said that his results were quite normal, and he could not compare himself to such monsters of learning as he and Samantha, but the hero still asked him to give it his all because there was nothing that was beyond his power. He assumed that the guy would soon overtake him. Samantha noted to herself that Tony was good at building relationships. Usually people would shy away from the best intern because they saw him as competition. She suggested that it was all about his calm nature, his leadership qualities, and his good sense of humor. She assumed that was why people liked him. However, Samantha wondered if the grandson of a powerful family had any weaknesses. Then she smiled, thinking that this guy was very interesting. Soon, Tony went to one of the offices because he had to prepare a presentation, and it turned out to be more difficult than he thought. Josh approached him, asking if his presentation was ready, since he would have to speak soon. When he realized that Tony was not ready yet, he offered his help, but the guy said that he had to handle it on his own but thanked his friend for his help. The hero frantically tried to figure out what to write on the next slide. He understood that all this was not so simple, but time passed. Suddenly, the system appeared above his head again and told him that new products were available in the store. He was awarded 2 honor points for maintaining the top spot for 2 weeks in a row. The more honor points he has, the more rare items he can purchase from the store. In the store, he could choose to memorize all the functionality of PowerPoint or create the perfect presentation. Tony was pleasantly surprised by such a good selection of products. Soon it was time for the presentation, and Tony delivered it with flying colors. Josh said he did a great job, and the rest of his team supported him as well. The guy assumed that the head man would take first place again. He said that Tony did a great job and it was his first time, but the hero said that he was exaggerating and judging him subjectively. The hero thought to himself that this was not the first time. He learned a lot at the construction site. He conducted physical exercises in front of an audience of more than 600 people. He even argued with someone he had just met over the amount of construction work involved, sometimes requiring him to work hard for days to get paid. It was necessary to always be confident. It was necessary to believe that he could combine everything in himself, hard work, and a sense of responsibility. However, this was not a complete list of what he needed. He also needed to think rationally in order to earn a decent income and not suffer losses. Compared to him, his colleagues are not as developed in the social aspect, but they will soon get used to it. He was just lucky, because people from the most different circles in which he knew since childhood helped him a lot. But at the same time, he's also worried about something else. He has come so far, remaining first in the top, but he wondered if he would be able to reflect his successful activities in the training center in the context of real life. He understood that he definitely wouldn't succeed, since not everything would always play into his hands, but he decided that he would get used to it. Soon, a meeting of graduates from different universities took place at the training center. Tony sat in the stands and watched what was happening. At that moment, Marvin approached him and asked why he was here alone. He said that Tony should return to the office since he was not on the university's list of graduates, but the hero said that there was no need. The manager told him that education was not the most important thing, and therefore there was no need to be so upset. But Tony couldn't help himself. Then Marvin sat down next to him and asked him to go somewhere with him. Tony didn't understand where he was taking him, but Marvin said that he just had to listen to him since he was his boss. Soon they left the training center and entered the courtyard. Marvin told him that the director of Elsung Group really likes the swimming pool and saunas, so each of his buildings is equipped with them. Then he invited the guy to go to the sauna with him. He said that the class reunion would last another 2 hours, and they had no business being there for that long, but Tony asked if it wouldn't be weird to spend that much time in the sauna. He said it was quite unusual because he had previously only used the pool and sauna at a construction site. Marvin said that the CEO's horoscope doesn't have many water signs, so when the company was first founded, there were incidents. It was funny. But such a big company makes decisions according to Chinese feng shui and the position of the stars. So Tony agreed to go to the sauna with his boss. The man noted that the intern had a fairly strong body. Tony thanked him and said that Marvin had a nice body too. Marvin said that he needs to take better care of his physical fitness because he is no longer young and working in the sales department is not that easy. He has been invited out for drinks many times to get a discount. Taking advantage of the opportunity, he decided to offer Tony something. He asked him to come to their sales department and promised that he would teach him everything. The hero was a little surprised by such an unexpected offer. Then Marvin said that he didn't need connections with his classmates for this. He said that it doesn't matter where he's from or what he's done, it's enough that he's diligent and hardworking. Tony then apologized and said that he still needed time to make a decision. Then he was silent for a moment. After that, he covered his nose with his fingers and went under the water. Underwater, he saw the system window again. She announced to him that she had completed a hidden mission. He had overcome the new program and could now cure his back, and as a reward, he received a healing elixir that could cure all ailments. Soon after, Marvin and Tony headed to the bathhouse. Marvin decided he should make his proposal again. He said that Tony was guaranteed to succeed if he worked with him. He would make sure of it. However, the hero said that he doubted, and for good reason. Marvin asked him what was the reason for his doubts. Tony said he had a goal of getting into the strategic planning department. Marvin was surprised by this answer, but Tony showed with his whole appearance that he was determined. After this, the men went into a cold bath, and Marvin said that he should not join this department as the job would break him. He said that most people got there through connections, and most likely no one would help him. In his opinion, the strategic planning department would not lead him anywhere in life. He insisted that Tony should not think about it, because their world is not as magical as it might seem at first, especially the strategic planning department, where all the elite gathered. He once again asked the guy to move to him, because in the sales department at least they would recognize him and appreciate his work. Tony said he would take his words into consideration and then asked how he knew all this information so well. Marvin said that at first he also wanted to get into the planning department, but then he saw and experienced what the elite were capable of. He graduated from the center while being in the 4th position in the top, so he got the chance to join the planning department. He then asked Tony if he knew that in order to join the department he had to work in each position for a year. Martin himself had failed the final selection, wasting a whole year. He said it was because of his education. He graduated from a less popular university than those he competed with. Then Tony wondered what was happening to the university graduates. If that was the case, then he now understood why Marvin was so eager to advertise the sales department to him. However, he thought that he could get there at any time, while there was only one chance to join the strategic planning department. He felt sorry to upset Marvin, but he had already made his decision. He was determined to get into the strategic planning department. Soon, a new school day began at the training center. In room 127, one of the interns was sitting. At that moment, a man came to him and asked if he had joined the company. When he realized that the guy did not recognize him, he said that he was the assistant manager, and his name was Chester. However, the guy had no idea where he knew him from. As it turned out, this intern was a third-generation employee of the Elsung Group company, Tony. He got a position in the company thanks to the vice president, his father, and at the moment he occupied the last place in the top. Chester said he once saw him at Jix University at a class reunion. However, Tony did not want to listen to him. He asked him not to pretend that they knew each other and not to talk nonsense. He said that the others were not allowed to know that he was here. Chester honestly said that he understood everything, adding that he never thought that he would meet Tony here like this. Then Tony asked him to stop sucking up and asked what he could teach him. Chester said he had a couple of exam questions left over from previous years, but Tony was more concerned with where he could have fun. When he realized that Chester didn't know the answer to this question, he said that he was no use. He then sent the man to buy him something fizzy. As Chester left, Tony cursed under his breath, not understanding why he had to put up with this. He wouldn't even get the director's job. He understood that his grandfather was going to pass his position to his father, and his father was too greedy. Then he suddenly thought about the fact that Chester could be one of his father's men. Meanwhile, Chester walked over to the board where the test results were posted and saw that Tony's name was at the top. He was happy for the young gentleman and thought that the vice president would be happy to hear that he had once again taken first place in the top. Soon, one of the employees went to the vice president to report that Tony had not taken the top spot in the first and second weeks. He said that it was a good idea to give him some of the exam questions in advance, to which the man replied that his only son had given him so many problems, but now he seemed to have settled down. Then the man asked him how the director was feeling. The man replied that unfortunately he was in good health. The doctor said that the old man would live at least another 10 years. The man was extremely annoyed that he was holding on for so long. The man then said that doctors always say something like that, but perhaps the director is hiding his true state of health. The man said that he had to collect as many shares as possible and gain control of the company. He said that they are buying them little by little using close partners, but it will take some time. Meanwhile, preparations were in full swing at the training center. The trainees brought flags of different colors to their headman. Samantha asked each of the interns to take 2 flags and check their order against the drawing. Tony said that in that case, the flags should be taken in the required order. Then Samantha suggested that they first watch the video from last year and use it as a guide for their training, and they should also try adding some new color. Tony suggested moving forward as they had planned, confident that they could handle it. The interns shared his sentiments, saying that together they could do it. Thus, preparations for the games began. Samantha and Tony showed the interns how they would perform. Before the start of practice, Tony, as the team leader, distributed his points among his teammates. The other interns were glad that they weren't in their leader's position. Everyone else would practice tomorrow, but now they needed to sort out the flags. Soon, Tony addressed them over the loudspeaker, asking them once again to make sure that everyone took 2 flags. All of Tony's comrades expressed their gratitude to him, probably in large part because of the sharing of points. The practice went smoothly, but that didn't mean they didn't have any problems at all. One of the interns approached Tony, asking him to take this task seriously, but the guy was confused as to who he was to tell him what to do. The intern didn't know what to do because this situation was not an easy one, so he decided to simply call the headman. He said that his namesake was doing nothing and was just playing on his phone. Then Tony said that he would definitely talk to him. He headed straight to the corner of the room where his namesake was sitting. He said that he was seeing him there for the first time and asked if his name was Tony too. He said he wanted to ask about what he was not happy with here because then he could help him. Then Tony simply asked to be left alone, and the headman said that in that case he would just be better off kicking him off the team. Tony was surprised by this answer. Then the elder said that he would carry him out and say that he was wounded. They had too many people on their team anyway. Tony was pleased with this decision, asking if he would take responsibility for the consequences himself. A few days later, mass games began. As expected, Samantha and Tony were the leaders. Almost all the trainees took part in the mass games. Tony then announced that the training center was launching its 68th mass games. He raised his hand up, shouting the team's battle cry. All this was closely watched by company executives and journalists. One of the managers approached the director. He said the atmosphere at the training center was surprisingly pleasant. He added that there is great energy coming from these 2 commanders. They seemed worth paying attention to. Then Philip said that apparently, Tony and Samantha will not leave others a chance to be in first and second place in the final selection. The manager was extremely surprised when he heard Tony's name. Meanwhile, new test results were posted on the board. Tony, the grandson of the manager, found that his name was in the second to last place. He did not understand why the same thing was happening for the 3rd week. He could not believe that everyone else was doing nothing but studying. However, he understood that his father could not know about this. At that moment, his phone rang. It turned out that he received a message that his card limit had increased. He didn't understand why this happened and assumed that his father was in a good mood. Meanwhile, a meeting of the company's management was taking place, at which it was decided to watch a video of the mass games of new employees, initiated by the founder of the company, El-sung Group. One of the men approached the director, Christopher, and told him that Tony had won first place in the top of the training center. He said he had a good chance of winning, with second place trailing him by as much as 18 points. Christopher was very surprised that his grandson finally got the first place. He thought that he must have pulled some kind of trick. Then another man approached the director, saying that he had been at these mass games. He said that he saw Tony for the first time, and he seemed to him to be a noble young man. He was impressed because the guy sang well and successfully led the process of mass games. Christopher couldn't believe what the men were saying. The CEO is not one to throw compliments around lightly, so Christopher decided to see his grandson's success for himself by watching the video. He didn't understand when Tony had become a commander, but he thought that he had finally decided to settle down. Soon the lights in the hall were turned off so that everyone could see the video recording. An image appeared on the screen showing the start of the mass games. On stage were Samantha and Tony, who were the game directors. Soon a close-up of Tony's face was shown on the screen. Then the CEO turned to the manager, saying that his grandson had a well-trained voice. However, Tony's father, Matthew, realized that this guy was not his son. Christopher wasn't very surprised because he knew Tony would never get his head together. A person can't change that quickly. However, he was still curious about something. He wanted to know who this young man was who was the namesake of his grandson. Then he remembered that he had met the guy in the bathhouse just recently. He wished him luck in his endeavors. Then he realized that this was the same guy he met at the construction site, and he was glad that he came to El-sung Group. When the meeting was over, the CEO said he couldn't believe that Tony had grown up and become a part of their company, and then he asked the director why he had kept him hidden for so long. However, to his surprise, Christopher replied that it was not his grandson. He said that he knows the first-place winner personally. He then asked his son when the training center program would end. Matthew replied that it would end next week. Then Christopher decided that maybe he should take a look. When Matthew was alone, he decided to call his son. He was extremely annoyed by everything that was happening. He asked his assistant to bring Tony to him right now. However, Tony was in one of the expensive bars at that moment. The bartender said that he ordered a statement for 2,470,000 won. Then Tony said that he was treating everyone today. His friends were happy that his card was finally unfrozen. He told the bartender that he would pay the entire amount at once. However, when he applied his card, something went wrong. The bartender asked him if he had another card, since the system was telling him that this card was blocked. Tony said that was impossible because it was his father's card, and then handed him another card. However, the ATM again refused to accept the card. The bartender reported that the card had been declared lost. Tony didn't understand what had happened to his father since he had just recently raised his limit. Then the bartender asked if he had another card. When he realized the guy didn't have any working cards or cash, he said he would call the police if that happened. Soon, the excursion money arrived, and all the interns went to the mountains. The guide asked to notify in advance if someone would be unable to participate in the hike due to health reasons. Tony was sitting with Marvin. The leader asked him how he felt at the end of the training period, to which the hero replied that he was very satisfied. Marvin said that it looked like he would hold on to first place until the very end, which was impressive, but the hero said there was still one more step left. Meanwhile, Samantha stared blankly out the window. The rest of the interns were chatting happily among themselves. By evening, the bus arrived at the right place. Tony informed his team that it was dangerous to walk at night, so the interns had to always stay in pairs. Soon, all the interns went to the mountains. The hero turned around to look at his team again. All the interns obediently followed him and Marvin. So the boys climbed the mountains for some time. At some point, Tony felt a sharp surge of fatigue. Then he suddenly stopped. Unable to breathe, Marvin immediately took him by the shoulders, asking what happened to him. Then Tony suddenly said that his back hurt a lot. The next moment, he screamed in pain, unable to bear the sensation. They were forced to stop, and then Tony told Marvin his story. The man asked how long he had been living with all this, and if he had any painkillers. He asked Tony to tell him the next time that his back was inflamed, right away, because you can't go on a hike under the influence of pills. But the hero replied that refusing to take part in a hike due to health reasons was tantamount to disqualification. He had no choice. He turned to Marvin, asking him to turn a blind eye to the situation if possible. The manager then asked if he could continue, to which Tony replied that he would have to. He said he would reach the top again. However, he asked Marvin once again to do him a favor and pretend that he had never seen it. Then the manager asked him why he had agreed to go such distances in the first place. Tony thought to himself that if he gave up now, he might not have started at all. After some time, he realized that his back was starting to hurt again, apparently because the analgesics were gradually wearing off. However, he couldn't give up now. He had to endure until the end, even if it was too painful for him. Thus, he was able to reach the top of the mountain with Marvin and took a memorable photo there. Soon, all the trainees returned back to the training center. As the training drew to a close, Marvin took to the stage to award those who had achieved amazing results. He asked some people to come on stage, among them was Samantha. Tony also rose from his seat. So Tony, Samantha, that guy Oliver who had been watching the couple a few days ago, Josh, and another intern from Tony's team came out on stage. Marvin said that on some special occasion the director would personally present an award to each of them. He then asked everyone to welcome Director Christopher. When Tony turned to look at the man, his face contorted in surprise. He heard that the director rarely appears in the media. Christopher walked onto the stage and waved to everyone present. Then it suddenly dawned on Tony. He remembered the day he had taken a sauna with some old man. And now he realized that this old man was Director Christopher himself. Tony looked at the man in surprise, not knowing how to act. Samantha looked at Christopher with respect. She thought to herself that she had returned here after 10 years, being indebted to him. Marvin said employee Tony received an award for his persistence in maintaining his top spot during the center's new employee training program. Then Christopher asked him how he felt. Tony timidly replied that he was in shock and could hardly believe what was happening. Then the director handed him a certificate, congratulating him on the great work he had done, and asked him not to stop there and to continue to conquer amazing heights. Tony accepted the certificate, still not believing that he was actually here on this stage. Christopher then turned to Samantha and said that she was not so lucky. She would have been first if her activity had been counted by last year's standards. However, he asked her not to lose her desire to do better because their company needed more talents like her. The girl thought to herself that everything happened only because of Christopher's support. Thanks to him, her heart disease was cured. She thanked the director and accepted the certificate. This concluded the training center's program for new employees. The interns went to their rooms to pack their things. Now all that was left for Tony to do was wait for the results to find out which department they would be transferred to in priority according to their first, second, and third choice. Now he had 5 days left to rest. During this time, all interns will receive information on their assignment to departments. Tony knew that he only had one thing left to do, and that was to use the reward he had received for the hidden quest. Soon, the hero arrived at the hospital where his mother was lying. He knew he had to hurry. He wondered if this elixir could cure his mother. However, he was also concerned about what to do with his back. However, this was not so important, because if his mother was healthy, then worries about his back would disappear on their own. Soon, the guy stopped in front of the door of the oncology department. He took the elixir out of his pocket. As it turned out, a few days earlier, Hannah's doctor had told Hank that the breast cancer had spread to her lymph nodes, lungs, and liver, and that further treatment was no longer possible at their hospital. Hank immediately shouted, asking what they meant since this was the best hospital in Korea. The doctor asked him to calm down because the man was also a doctor, and who else but him should know what was happening to the woman. Then Hank was asked if there really was no way out. The doctor said that the best option would be to spend the last moments of her life next to her, and this is what the patient herself wants. After that, Hank went to Hannah's room. The woman asked him not to worry. She said that her sister would pick her up in 3 hours, and he needed to go home. However, Hank insisted. He said that he would pick her up himself and take care of her. He packed her things into a suitcase, sat her down in a stroller, and said that they would go home. At that moment, Hannah's son entered the room. Hank was upset to see Tony there because he knew he would have to tell him bad news. Hannah was also surprised to see her son here. The hero did not understand why his mother was suddenly being discharged. He then knelt down in front of her, and Hannah told him that she wanted to go home, but Tony asked her why she was in a wheelchair since her treatment was not finished yet. Hannah smiled weakly, saying that she had some reasons for it. However, Tony did not want to listen to all this. He said that he would definitely be able to fix everything. Then Hannah hugged him tightly and held him close. She started crying, saying that she was very sorry. When evening came, Hank called a taxi to go with Hannah alone. The woman asked why he asked to go separately, to which the man replied that he wanted to discuss something with her alone. Then he turned away from her, not knowing where to start, but deciding to tell it like it is. He proposed to Hannah. The woman was shocked by this proposal. She asked what he was talking about because he needed to live his own life. Hank said that this is his life and he regrets letting Hannah go to her husband a long time ago. They could have lived happily together if this hadn't happened. He said he believed that her husband would support them from heaven, and he would take responsibility for Hannah's life and be there until one of them died. Hannah began to cry, saying that she would only be a burden in his life, but Hank said that he didn't want to have any more regrets. Soon evening came and Tony arrived at his mother's apartment. He lifted his suitcase upstairs. However, when he opened the door of the room, he realized that no one was home. At that moment, Hank came out of Hannah's room and said that she fell asleep after taking painkillers. After this, the men went into the living room and an awkward pause hung between them. Hank said he had to go, but he would be back soon with his things as he planned to settle here for a while. Hearing this, Tony smiled and approved of the man's decision. He walked him to the exit, watching him get dressed. Finally, Hank turned around and addressed Tony. He asked him not to worry about his mother as he would take care of her. After that, he said that he could call him if something happened. When Hank left, Tony went to the room where his mother was. He sat down next to her on the bed, thinking to himself that she had been through a lot. Then he reached into his jacket. Soon he pulled out a bottle of multicolored liquid from there. He said that he wanted to give this elixir to his mother. He tipped the bottle down, intending to give it to Hannah, but it did not flow. Tony looked closely at the bottle, not understanding why the liquid was not flowing out. The system then told him that the liquid would automatically flow when he brought it to the correct place of use, and then Tony again tilted the elixir towards his mother's lips and the liquid began to flow. As the liquid touched her lips, his mother's bed suddenly lit up with a bright light. He intended to give his mother the whole bottle, but when she drank half, the liquid stopped flowing again. The system told him that he had used enough and asked Tony to use the remaining amount to heal his back. Then Tony suddenly realized that the system knew that he would use the elixir to cure his mother and not himself. After some time, morning came. When Hannah woke up, she was surprised to find that her body was completely pain-free. She couldn't believe that this had happened to her. It was like some kind of miracle. Tony watched his mother with a smile. He then turned to the bottle, saying that he did not know who was behind all this, but he was immensely grateful to him. Soon after, Hank arrived at the apartment. He still did not fully believe that the woman would be able to go down the stairs on her own. He offered to carry her in his arms, but Hannah said that she was fine. She didn't understand how this was possible. At first, it seemed to her that she was completely asleep. Then Hank suggested going to the doctor and finding out what he would say, but for now it would be better for her not to strain herself. As it turned out, the study confirmed that all cancer cells had completely disappeared from Hannah's body, and the attending physician accepted the results, although he had a hard time believing what was happening. Mr. Hank, being a doctor of a different specialty, could not accept the reality of what was happening without a proper medical explanation. But in the end, he had no other choice. He walked out of the office and sat down next to Hannah and Tony, saying that miracles did happen, of course, but they needed to monitor the woman's health very closely. After some time, Hannah, Hank, and Tony finally got used to the current state of affairs. His life as a hero, as a full-time worker, began. He arrived at the headquarters of the El Sung Group main office. At that moment, one of the workers approached them, asking if the other workers had received their salaries since they were supposed to receive $3 million. As it turned out, he only received $2,210,001. Then Josh told him that the senior said that they only receive 80% of the rate during the internship. He then turned to Oliver, who was the leader of Team A. The guy said his name was Clyde and said it was nice to meet the team leader. He said that they were all about 26 here, but Tony said that he was 25, explaining that he started school early. Oliver said he was turning 28 this year, had studied abroad, and joined the company a little later. She and Clyde decided that they would take care of each other. At that moment, Albert, the director of the strategic planning department, approached them. He said that they didn't have much time and asked everyone to go to the conference room. When everyone arrived, he greeted all the workers in his department and said that he wasn't sure if they had heard about this, but the planning department accepts workers who have been with the Elsung group for 3 years, after which they decide which 5 people will stay. Then Josh said he had a question. He was wondering what they would do for 2 years while waiting to be accepted into the department. Or he said that they all know what to do. Strategic planning is called the flower of Elsung group. He then asked the workers what happens when a flower does not open its petals. Josh replied that in that case, the flower is not able to reproduce. Connor said that without flowering, there is no reproduction. And without reproduction, it cannot grow and it will lead to withering. A company must continue to grow for its future in the global market. A fading company will not survive. So everyone here needs to be willing to become a flower to join their department. They need to excel in several areas to achieve their goal. They cannot teach how to become a flower. Workers must achieve this on their own. Real growth comes only from personal experience. Then he took out small sheets of paper from his pen, rolled into tubes. He said that these were the departments that the workers would have to work in. They would have to choose one at a time in reverse order of the evaluation top. Tony couldn't believe that he was relying on chance. First up was Clyde. He said he was on the 3rd life insurance sales team. Josh said he was given the electronics quality control department at Elsung Group. Oliver said he was in HR. Samantha said she was in the electronics and home appliances sales department of the company. Tony wanted to voice the department he was in, but Albert stopped him. He said that he didn't have to say it out loud. There was only one department left anyway. He then addressed the staff, saying that in 2 months he would receive a report on their work and their progress from the department heads, which they would rely on to judge their abilities. Then Clyde asked what would happen after those 2 months. Albert said they would be transferred to another department on the same basis as today. A few days later, Tony was sitting at the bus stop waiting for his bus. However, before he stopped, a black car suddenly stopped. Hank looked out from there and said he would give him a ride to the station or he would be late for his first day at work. He said he knew the address of Tony's office because he had it saved on his phone. He was lucky that he worked close to his company. He also asked the guy not to worry. He said that he used to live in that area, and the guy can stay with them until he gets married. Tony said he wasn't worried. He was even grateful he had a place to stay in Seoul, and if it weren't for Hank, he would have had to travel all that way alone or find a studio. Then the doctor asked him how his back was. The hero hesitated a little, not knowing what to answer. The day he gave his mother half of the healing elixir flashed through his mind again. After that, the system asked him to use the remaining remedy to cure his back. Tony obediently drank the rest of the elixir. Immediately after that, he felt that there was no more pain in his back. At that moment, he heard his mother's voice from behind the door. When he realized that his mother wanted to see him right now and tell him that she was feeling fine, the system immediately told Tony that he needed to hurry and hide the elixir. A few seconds later, the woman opened the door and asked what her son was doing there. Now, Hank said that if Tony needed painkillers, he could ask him for them. He might feel better, but it was only a matter of time. He said he wouldn't tell his mother about it, but the operation shouldn't be delayed. Then Tony said with a smile that he would come to him soon so that he could examine his back. Hank smiled and looked warmly at the guy. Meanwhile, the story moves to a branch of the life insurance sales department. Marvin walked back and forth around the department, not knowing what to do. Then he suddenly saw that a new announcement had been posted on the stand, and he immediately went there. He was very pleased to see Tony's name on the list of new employees in the department. At that moment, the branch manager approached him, and Marvin immediately addressed him. He said that they had a new employee coming today, and he was bringing him up to speed, but the manager said that he had heard that he had lost a lot of money because he had been forced to become a manager. Marvin said that in return they got a capable worker, since Tony was a very smart guy, and he wanted to show him around and teach him a thing or two. The manager said that if he was so eager to help him, then he would help him. He said that the new worker was now at the coffee shop on the first floor. Apparently, he forgot his pass, so he asked Marvin to go down there and bring the worker to them. Marvin replied that it was very unlike Tony. When he went down, he saw a completely unfamiliar person. Tony, the vice president's son, informed him that he was now a new employee of the company. He sipped his coffee serenely and didn't even get up to greet Team B's leader, whom he remembered from the training center. Meanwhile, the story moves to the head office of the Elsung group. Tony arrived at his place of work, as it turned out. Oliver worked there too. The men realized that they had apparently been assigned to the same department. He asked, not jokingly, whether the HR department really doesn't suspect that they are here through the strategic planning department. Oliver laughed and said that apparently they didn't know. Soon the men reached the office they needed. There was a girl sitting inside and they immediately greeted her. The girl realized that these were new employees and asked them to wait a couple of minutes on the sofa. Oliver and Tony went to the couch waiting for the girl to come to them. She soon came to them, saying that she was sure that they recognized her because they had met during personality assessment tests. Tony immediately noticed that she had turned her badge, which had her name written on it, away from them. Then Tony suddenly remembered the day he took the test. The girl introduced herself as Kimberly, saying that she joined the company in 2017 and was looking forward to working productively together. Then he told her that he remembered her and how she joined the company. The girl said that he had a very good memory, because he even remembered her name. He didn't say that the result of their personality test was really amazing. He was very surprised when he saw it, that's why he remembered it. Then another man entered the office and asked how Kimberly was doing. The girl said that the new employees remembered her name. Apparently, they did well on the personality assessment tests. Then the man, whose badge was also hidden in his pocket, asked Oliver if he remembered his name. The guy was confused. He didn't understand how this man knew his name, and moreover, he didn't understand how he should remember his name. He decided that he needed to guess his name to earn their favor. He then assumed that the man's name was Marvin. Hearing this, the man was extremely annoyed. Then Oliver decided to admit that he didn't remember his name. Kimberly said it was okay since it had been 2 months since they met. However, the man said that if he wanted to make a good impression, they should point their finger at the sky. He asked Oliver if he was going to guess the names of the clients he would be working with. He then turned to Tony, asking if he remembered his name. The hero said that he is the assistant manager Connor, who became a member of the corporation in 2014. Then Connor shook his hand, praising him for his good memory. He said that Kimberly was bringing them up to speed, and that they should be tasked with sorting resumes first, but she said that they would be joining the strategic planning department later and doubted that they could be trusted with information and personal data. Connor said that as soon as he came here, they pushed him everywhere without caring about personal data, so they need to be allowed to integrate into the work process. They will leave their department so quickly. They are not their people anyway. Tony was surprised that they knew they were applying to the planning department. Then Kimberly laughed, saying that perhaps they would change their minds and stay here as she had done before, because they needed workers too. Then Connor said that it didn't matter to him, since it wasn't his decision anyway, and left the office. Kimberly explained to the guys that, to tell the truth, she too had been looking at it with admiration. She does strategic planning and dreamed of working there, but after trying many other jobs, she suddenly realized that HR was the best option for her and decided to stay there. Tony realized that this meant that Kimberly had once been a top trainee too. The girl asked him if he knew what the job of a human resources manager was. Tony said that as far as he knows, the work in the department includes periodic training. In the process, they are connected with the recruitment of personnel, for example, state or special significance. The employees of the department are also responsible for the reassignment of employees. Kimberly smiled and said that it looked like he was preparing for the meeting. She said that they were responsible for everything that could be related to personnel and its management. Their main task was to collect data on employees and structure it into a database. She then asked the guys if they were familiar with their company's office programs, to which the men responded in the affirmative. She said they currently have about 3,000 applications for special duty workers, so she asked them to sort them by criteria, location abroad, 3 years of experience, and what department they are from. The men will be working on this together, so they should divide the duties. Tony and Oliver immediately agreed. Oliver said there were only 3,000 applications, so they had to split them in half. He asked Tony to do the first 1,500, and he would take care of the second half of the documents. Tony asked him if he really thought there was any way they could get it done faster. Oliver asked him if he didn't agree with him. Kimberly then asked them to hurry up and start working, as she had to hand it in by the evening. Oliver immediately got ready and said that he would start work right away. So they worked for 3 hours. Tony was almost finished. All he had to do was transfer the information from the documents into the table. It wouldn't take much time. However, Oliver was not doing so well. He was very exhausted by this work, and he was not sure that he would finish by the evening. Then Tony stood up from his seat and walked up to Oliver, asking if he was finished. The man looked surprised, asking if he had already sorted his part. The hero said that the program had an auto-filter and search function. He used it to sort the data according to categories, and now all he had to do was print the documents. Oliver said that it looked like he wouldn't be able to finish today and he didn't know what to do. Then Tony said that he took care of his half of the documents too. They could say that they did it all together. Oliver couldn't believe that his partner had helped him so much. The hero said that you need to respect your comrades and love your country and then everything will be fine. Then he called Kimberly, saying that they had finished the work together. They had done it much faster. At first, the girl didn't believe it and asked again if they were sure that they could send her the finished file. Then Tony said he would send it via corporate email. When Kimberly checked their document, she noted that everything looked quite good. She told the assistant manager that the new employees were very good. Connor chuckled and then asked them if they smoked. Oliver raised his hand and said that he smoked. He then called him up to the roof and asked if Tony wanted to join them. However, the guy thanked him for the invitation but was forced to refuse. Soon after, Oliver and Connor went to smoke on the roof of the company's headquarters. Connor asked the man how his first day was going, but Oliver himself didn't understand yet. Connor said that he shouldn't worry because it's always difficult at first, but then he'll get used to it. Oliver really hoped so. Connor then asked him how well he knew Tony. Oliver said he knew him quite well. He was the team leader, and Tony led the B team during the training period. Connor said this guy, the leader of a top team who had moved into the strategic planning department, seemed to understand that he was the best of the best. He said Tony is incredible for many reasons. He was not a graduate of a prestigious university, but achieved everything with the help of a student loan bank, and here he copes just fine. the only work experience in his life he acquired through physical labor, which is of no use in an office. Oliver couldn't believe that Tony had earned his living through physical labor before this. Connor asked if he didn't know about it. Oliver said he had no idea, since they had only met him at the training center. He said that, judging by the information from the HR department, Tony's situation was fundamentally different from Oliver's. He asked the guy to be kinder to his partner, because he was older than him. Oliver smiled and replied that it was. Connor then headed back into the building, saying that he always enjoyed making friends with his colleagues, and asked Oliver not to be wary of Tony just because they were ranked differently. When Oliver realized that the elders here were so kind and caring, he smiled. Soon after this evening came. Tony and Oliver were walking together after work. Then the guy asked the hero if the team doesn't throw a festive evening for newcomers. Tony replied that no one else does anything like that. Then Oliver suggested celebrating their first day at work. Tony asked him where he wanted to go. Oliver said he knew a place. Soon the men came to a small food stall. They sat down at the table, and Oliver asked the saleswoman to bring them some fish pie soup and 2 bottles of soju. He poured the drink into Tony's glass and offered it to him. Then he asked him where he came from. Tony said he came from Cheonan. He also heard that Oliver was from Sokcho. The man said that they were both from provincial towns, and it wouldn't hurt for them to get to know each other better. He said that since they had joined the company at the same time, they could talk to him in a way that he was comfortable with and skip all the formalities. Tony smiled and agreed to this proposal. At that moment, a message came on his phone, Clyde talking about how Tony annoys him. The hero was surprised, not understanding what he had to do with it and why he was annoying someone. Then he said that he didn't mean him. He reminded Tony that he had an annoying namesake. He explained that today their boss from the training center signed a contract with a client regarding insurance. But Tony was standing there, looming over her, arms crossed, eyes wide. The client immediately became indignant, asking why this young man was looking at her like that. As it turned out, the client ended up not signing anything, and thus the company lost $200 million. Then Oliver asked Tony what was going on. The hero said that his friend wrote a couple of messages in the educational chat. Oliver was surprised that they had such a chat. Then Tony reminded him of the group he had studied with at the training center. He said they had created a general chat room, including everyone who had been in the strategic planning department. He then asked if he remembered Tony and their teams, and Oliver's face immediately became angry, telling him not to even start talking about him because the guy was just awful. At that moment, the hero remembered the day when he encountered his namesake. He approached him and asked what he was not happy with. In response, Tony only asked to be left alone. Then Oliver asked if Samantha was in this chat. Tony said she was there and asked why he was asking. Oliver's face turned red and he said that the girl was very beautiful and smart, and then asked to be added to the chat too. The hero said that he would ask the others about it and add him if they didn't mind. Then Oliver got up from his table and said that all the drinks would be on him. The next day, the men went back to work at the company. Kimberly said that at the very bottom of their company's website, they would find videos that listed the criteria for recruiting staff, and their job today was to review these videos and they would be published next week. She asked them to think about what they should prepare and what they should review. The men said she could rely on them. At that moment, the phone did not ring again. When he picked up the phone, he saw that the manager's assistant Marvin was calling him, but the hero did not understand why he was calling him at such a time. He picked up the phone and greeted him in a whisper. Then Marvin screamed, saying that he had been causing them problems since day one, and today he had not even shown up for the event without any warning. Then Tony said that he was at work now. Apparently Marvin called the wrong Tony. The man apologized for getting the numbers wrong and then said that the guy was really getting on his nerves. Then he decided to ask his friend what department he was currently working in. Tony said he was in HR right now, and then Marvin said they should call each other later. The man was extremely unhappy that no one was picking up his employee's phone, so he decided to simply call his home number. Meanwhile, the story moves to the cottage of the director of the Elsung group, Christopher. In the middle of the day, his phone suddenly rang. He picked up the phone and asked who was calling him. It was Marvin, and he wished the man good morning and said that he was an assistant manager at the company where Tony worked. Christopher asked why he was calling him. Marvin then explained that Tony hadn't shown up for work today, so he wanted to know if something had happened that had caused him to miss out. Christopher said that everything was calm between them, and then he asked again if Tony really had not shown up for work. Marvin said he had been warned yesterday for his behavior, and today he was worried that this might be the case. Christopher asked the man his name again, and Marvin introduced himself again. The director said that he didn't know where he had gone either, but said that he would try to call him and tell him to contact him. Marvin apologized to him for disturbing him and thanked him for his help. Before Christopher hung up, he heard the manager's voice on the phone asking where Tony was now, but Marvin said that his relatives didn't know anything either. The man said that this guy needs to be fired immediately. He refuses to come to work only because he gave him a lecture on behavior for a broken contract for $200 million. As it turned out, Christopher had heard the entire conversation. When he realized what had happened, he immediately cursed his grandson. The man's secretary asked if he had any problems. Then Christopher screamed, ordering the secretary to call the company's vice president and order him to drag his offspring in by the scruff of the neck within the hour. The man decided to ask the reason for such a hurry. Then Christopher said he didn't need a reason. The secretary should just call them right now. 3 hours had passed since then. The company's work was in full swing, but Tony had some difficulties. In front of him was a questionnaire in English. At that moment, Connor approached him and asked if there were any problems with the resume. Then Tony scratched his head awkwardly, saying that his command of English was not that good. Connor said that the level of English needed here was not that high. Basic would be enough for him. Then Tony explained that his English was just terrible. Connor asked how many marks he got on the exam. He hoped the answer would be around 800 or 900. However, Tony said he only scored 500 because they didn't take into account his writing skills. Then Connor asked to send him this file, saying that he would deal with the resume himself, but warned Tony that he needed to improve his English if he wanted to continue working for the company. After work, they went to the store to buy English textbooks, but he didn't know which book to start with. Suddenly, he saw a book called English for Business and decided that it would be a good choice. This book cost 18,000 won. Soon evening came and the heroes returned to their apartment. He tried to learn English with the help of a book he had just bought. However, he was very bothered by the fact that everything he wrote down was very difficult to remember. He has no problem understanding politics, economics, and news, but he struggles with language, perhaps because he is only good at memorization. Then the system offered him to use the exclusive goods store. Among them were a package for beginners in learning Arabic, Portuguese, Korean mastery, and perfumery. The system also said that there were 7 days left until the store update, so Tony thought that maybe the English skill would appear here later, but he didn't understand how he could collect enough points. The system offered him to use the available mini-quests, but the hero was very tired and decided to think about it after a sound sleep. The next day, he came to the company's head office again. Kimberly's work was in full swing. Then Tony blinked, deciding to activate his skill. He had to look at a person or object for more than 10 seconds, and then the mini-quest he needed would appear. At that moment, a system appeared above Kimberly's head. It reported that the employee's computer had been periodically displaying a blue screen lately, so Tony needed to ask permission and fix her software. Then the hero turned to the girl, saying that he heard that her computer had been freezing up frequently for the last couple of days. The girl asked why he suddenly started talking about this. Tony didn't say that he assumed it was because of the updates, so he asked her to let him take a look at her computer since his computer had been acting the same way before. The girl allowed him, since she would have to leave for the morning report anyway. Tony said she could rely on him. He soon began upgrading her computer, which was almost complete. He then went to Connor, saying that he heard that he had decided to quit smoking, so he brought him some candy to help him cope. The man asked him how he knew that he was quitting since he had only decided to do it today. The hero grinned, saying that the bird whispered to him, and then wished the manager good luck. Connor thanked him for the candy and words of encouragement. After that, the system informed him that the mini-quest had been completed. Now Tony had 4 points. Then the guy asked if there were any additional quests. He turned his head to the side, hoping to see the system window there. Then he turned his head the other way. However, when he realized that there were no more quests left, he became quite upset. At that moment, a man entered the office. It was the general manager of the HR department, Jordan. He asked if anything big had happened while he was away. Connor said they were stable, and then they asked how his vacation was. However, Jordan noticed the newcomers and asked who these guys were. Tony immediately walked up to him and greeted the man, saying that he was a new employee and would try to do his best. After that, Oliver greeted him. Jordan was surprised because he initially applied to the strategic planning department, and this upset him a little since none of the new employees went specifically to the HR department. Then Connor said that they didn't hire anyone on purpose so that they could pick someone from the strategic planning applicants. Jordan said that if you think about it, they never had new employees coming out of training camp. It felt like just yesterday that Connor and Kimberly had made the decision to stay in their department. Even though they had applied for planning, time had flown by so quickly. After finishing their time in HR under the planning department program, if the men find that they like it better here, they should let Jordan know, because HR may be better than planning. Oliver couldn't believe his ears. Could he really stay here instead of going into strategic planning? Jordan added that this is not a place where they can stay just by wishing for it. Everything will depend on their work results. Meanwhile, the story moves again to the house of Director Christopher. Even from the street, his cry could be heard that he asked the men to come to him half an hour ago. He asked Tony why it took him so long to get there and why he didn't show up for work. The guy said he was late at a friend's birthday party and asked his grandfather for forgiveness. Christopher asked if he really called that an excuse. Then Tony bowed again, asking his grandfather for forgiveness. Then Christopher picked up his phone and started calling someone. As it turned out, he called the HR department. Tony picked up the phone and asked how he could help. Christopher introduced himself by saying that he was the chairman. At first, Tony couldn't believe that the chairman of the Elsung group was actually calling him. Kimberly and Jordan were also very surprised. Christopher then asked to transfer Tony to the company's construction department. Then the hero said that he was currently in the HR department and asked whether the chairman really wanted to transfer him to another department. Christopher then clarified that he meant his grandson and asked again to transfer him to construction work. The hero said he would definitely do so, and before he could ask if the chairman needed anything else, the man hung up. Jordan asked him if the chairman had really called him. The hero said the chairman wanted him to transfer Tony from life insurance to the construction department. Jordan asked him why it happened so suddenly and why he called him personally. Kimberly said that Tony is the chairman's grandson. Jordan couldn't believe his ears. He didn't fully believe that they were talking about the codename SSS. Then they finally realized that the guy from the training center was the director's grandson. Meanwhile, Tony fell to his knees, begging his grandfather to forgive him. Christopher said there was no need to apologize to him. He would transfer his grandson to a foreign branch anyway. He would work on a construction site in the Middle East for a year. Maybe the desert heat would help him come to his senses. Tony couldn't believe that his grandfather was actually taking him to the desert. Then he said that he would definitely improve and would not make such a mistake again. They just needed to forget about everything this time. He fell at his grandfather's feet, begging him to leave him there. He said that he didn't like the sand at all. Then Christopher kicked him, calling him a pathetic fool. The blow was strong enough to send Tony flying to the floor. At that moment, the secretary came up to him and helped him up. Christopher said that he didn't help him because his grandson didn't deserve help. The secretary had no choice but to make amends. Then he left the room with Christopher. He asked the man to inform the managers that they were working without lunch breaks due to the delay. Tony was left sitting alone in the room. When everyone left, he suddenly began to cry. Soon the next day arrived and the heroes went to work again in the HR team. He said they had received annual leave application forms this month and asked Kimberly to let him distribute them as he had nothing better to do. The girl said that if he wanted to do it, she would be only glad. Thus, the hero set to work. The girl noted to herself that Tony is a person who seeks and completes tasks independently. Then she noticed that Oliver had gone out for a smoke break again. Apparently, he was doing this often. At this point, Tony noticed a mistake in the documents. He called someone and said that there was a mistake in the form, so he wanted to ask permission to correct it. His interlocutor thanked the young man for his attentiveness. At that moment, a man in a suit and glasses entered the office. Tony immediately stood up from his seat, greeting the man and asking how he could help him. The man said he was Donald from the university's career support team. He had come to discuss business cooperation and asked where he could find Connor's manager. Tony said that he had gone out for a while but would be back soon, and suggested that the man wait for him on the sofa for a while. Donald sat down on the sofa and began to read something on his phone. Kimberly was worried that the manager was not returning and was keeping the customer waiting. Tony noticed this too, so he made Donald a cup of coffee and said that they had notified the manager and he would be there in 10 minutes. Donald thanked him for his vigilance and for the coffee. Kimberly let out a sigh, glad that Tony was there, otherwise she would have had to do all the work. Oliver entered the room shortly after. He sprayed his clothes, hoping that would get rid of the smell of tobacco, and Kimberly noted to herself that he didn't put much effort into his work. Connor entered the room shortly after him and greeted Donald, saying that he shouldn't have come in person, but thanked him for coming all the way. Donald said that Connor was a contractor and he was a subcontractor, so he couldn't not come. He asked the man when the university's career information session would be. Connor said he thought they should schedule this meeting during the holidays, with active hiring starting in the second half of the year, around August, so they needed to move things along quickly. Donald said that students should think about their careers at any time. After all, it is up to them whether they become employees of this company or not. Before leaving, he apologized for interrupting their work and said that they should talk outside, but first he would go to the restroom. Connor said he would wait for him. Before leaving the office, he called out to Tony. He thanked the guy for letting him know about the client's arrival, as he had completely forgotten that he had an appointment that day. Tony said he should have been the one thanking him. He resumed his work soon after. At that moment, someone called the office. Kimberly picked up the phone and said that she heard that the part that the boss had outlined was not mentioned. Then Tony realized he had to take care of this call. He picked up his phone and joined the conversation. He introduced himself and said that he was currently replacing Connor. As it turned out, it was Christopher who called and asked to urgently send a person to his office. Tony said that the request would be fulfilled immediately. Then Kimberly asked him who it was. Tony said that the chairman asked to come up to him. Apparently, he was going to call Connor, but since he was busy now, it was better for him to go there. Then Kimberly asked who answered the phone. Tony said it was him. The girl said that in that case, it was worth listening to him. After that, Tony went to the elevator. It was his first call from the chairman, and he was a little nervous. Soon, he arrived at the right floor, where he was met by the girl at the reception. She asked how she could help him, and Tony said that he had come from HR at the request of the chairman. The girl called the chairman, asking if he had called the man, and touched on the personnel, and then Christopher told her to let him in. After that, the girl smiled and said that Tony could come in. When the hero entered the office, he saw his namesake kneeling in front of Christopher, who was yelling at him, saying that he would definitely go abroad. Tony begged to be forgiven this time. Then the hero attracted attention to himself by saying that the chairman had called him. His namesake, kneeling, did not understand what was happening. The hero didn't really like the atmosphere in this room. Christopher then told Tony to go with his grandson to the airport and buy him a plane ticket, personally put him on the flight to the Middle East, and let him come back only when he had gained some decent work experience. Tony again pleaded with his grandfather, begging him to forgive him. Then his father intervened in the conversation, saying that Tony was the chairman's grandson and he should pardon him. Then Christopher wondered if he really should forgive him again. Pictures from the past, from 1970, flashed before his eyes again. The woman stood on the pier and screamed the boy's name with tears streaming from her eyes. Soon a man approached her, and then the woman said that she could not find him. The man tried to calm her down and told her not to worry because they would definitely find him. As it turned out, their 5-year-old child had gone missing, and the woman said that she wanted to die because she saw no point in living without her son. After this, the story moves to the orphanage 2 years later. As it turned out, the couple could not find their child, and they decided to adopt another baby. They promised that they would take good care of him and raise him as their own child. Then Christopher thought about how trouble had been following this man since his appearance, and he was already simply furious. Then he turned to Tony, and both boys thought the chairman was talking to them. He said that Tony might go back to his place because of HR. The hero said that he understood him and left the office. Christopher then turned to his grandson. He said the guy who just left was #1 on the top, so he asked his grandson what he thought of when he saw him. However, Tony just lowered his head, not knowing what to answer. Christopher said that this guy shows that he puts a lot of effort into his work so that no one has to envy him. He achieves amazing heights. He probably works so hard that he only sleeps a couple of hours a day. He said that this guy was the captain of the team and his grandson was just a cheerleader. Then he asked where he was on the list. Tony's father immediately grimaced when he heard this question. Christopher said he was in last place and he was going to inherit this company and he didn't even show up for work. Then Tony said that he realized his mistake and asked to give him another chance. He promised that he would work as hard as he could. Tony's father apologized to the chairman, saying that he would raise him better and try to make sure that he did not make mistakes again. He addressed him as his only son, saying that Tony was his only grandson, so he should show leniency. Christopher thought about his words. Then he said that he was giving him one last chance. Tony immediately became happy and thanked his grandfather for the chance he had given him. Christopher said that he was giving the chance, but not his company. Tony made a big mistake here, so he needs to find a job elsewhere. Meanwhile, the story moves back to the HR department. To the surprise of everyone present, Tony, the chairman's grandson, entered the office. The hero asked what brought him here. He said that Mr. Chairman asked for his transfer to another division, so he came here to have Tony transfer him to Seoul. The next day, Samantha informed the hero that Tony, the chairman's grandson, had transferred to their department. The hero was not very happy that they were laughing at his name again. Then he asked the girl what this guy had done this time. She also said that an elderly couple came into their store and changed the channel for 30 minutes. It looked like they were going to watch a movie. Then Tony walked up to the couple and told them to get out of there if they weren't going to buy anything. After that, they went to the information desk and complained about him. They said that the new workers had no manners at all, because of which Samantha and the entire workforce were called together, apparently. She would be scolded and whined about how you can't be rude to customers. Tony couldn't believe that this guy was causing trouble again from his first day in the new department. After some time, he did something again in the middle of the conference. He said that he would go to the toilet for a while, but as it turned out, he never came back. Everyone was shocked by his behavior. Soon it was Saturday and the story moved to church. As it turned out, Hannah accepted Hank's proposal and they decided to get married, and they invited Tony to their wedding. The young man noted that his mother was wearing a wig, and the woman asked if she looked too strange in it. Tony said that it just looked unusual, and she herself looked very beautiful, and he would always support her. And he also hoped that she would find happiness with Hank. Soon the wedding ceremony began in the church and the pastor came to tie the knot. He wished that their love would grow and their relationship would develop favorably. Tony noted that it was a one-guest wedding, but that was what his mom and Hank wanted. Hank vowed to give his all to the marriage, just as he had when he confessed the feelings he had held for a long time. Hannah agreed to give all her love to her husband, because heaven does not often give a second chance to find your person. Then the pastor said that they should end the ceremony with a kiss. After that, Hannah and Hank kissed. After some time, they showed up at the pastor's office. The man congratulated them, grinning, and said that he thought Hank would remain a loner. Hank thanked him for taking the time to make the ceremony official and said they were now in his debt. The man said it was no big deal since he was about to retire soon anyway. Then Hanku chuckled, saying that there were a lot of people who relied on him. However, the pastor said he did not think the priest would approve of a second marriage being consummated by a mediocre man like him. Hannah countered by saying that the man was her benefactor too. The pastor chuckled, saying that he was not such a benefactor, but thanked the woman for her kind words and then asked what they were going to do now. The couple said they wanted to go to the cemetery where Hannah's ex-husband Howard is buried. The pastor was quite surprised by this answer. Hank said they should stop by before they went anywhere. The pastor sighed, not understanding how the man who was supposed to outlive them all could leave this world so early. Soon Hannah, Hank, and Tony went to the cemetery, then told the guy that long before his father met his mother, he paid for his education in medical school. Hannah was surprised to hear this fact. Hank then said that they had to leave the orphanage at age 20, with only the government money to pay for the first few months, and medical school was expensive, so Howard helped him a lot with the fees. Hank was surprised that he never told them about it. Hannah said he always said they were just good friends and nothing more. Then Tony wondered he was curious about how his father was doing now. Soon they arrived at the cemetery. Hank knelt down at Howard's grave and said he had married Hannah. He said it seemed like heaven itself wished them a happy life, but the doctor said that Hannah was completely cured of cancer, and now Howard would have to support their new life. Hannah cried, saying that even before he died, he asked her to continue living happily, and she would fulfill it. She would raise Tony and take care of him properly. She would try to enjoy every day if only he would support them. Tony thought to himself that he would do everything he could to make his dad proud of his son, and then thanked him for everything. Now later the hero said that it was time for him to go. His mother asked him to stay and have dinner together before he left. However, Tony said that they needed to prepare for their honeymoon and he would only get in the way. He said goodbye to his mother and Hank and asked them to take care of themselves. On Monday morning, he returned to work at the company. He brought a spare amplifier just in case. Connor met him in the parking lot and asked if he was ready. Tony said he loaded up the microphone amplifier and 3 knobs. Connor said that he shouldn't smile like that. An informational conference about jobs and employment might seem like fun, especially since it would be his first event. But they had a tight schedule. They would need to hold it at several universities, and then they would see if Tony could smile like that at the end of the day. They soon arrived at Soan University. Tony tried to adjust the microphone. He asked Oliver, who was helping him, if he could hear him. Oliver said he could be heard perfectly. Tony then asked him to go to the other side and check the sound there. He suspected that it might be humming. Oliver came to the other side, but he did not understand what it meant to be radioactive. Then he said with surprise that he heard Tony's voice twice. The hero said that this is what the word phone it means. Then he said that something needed to be adjusted on the amplifiers and asked to wait a second, since he needed to check the volume settings. Oliver chuckled, saying that there was nothing Tony couldn't do. While the hero was adjusting the equalizer, he thought about the fact that past experience is always useful. Then he decided to test the microphone again. He asked Oliver if the sound had improved. Oliver said that there were no extraneous noises now. Then the hero said that in that case he could go down. At that moment, Connor entered the room and asked if everything was ready. Tony said they had set up everything from the computer, video files, sound systems, microphones, and entry and exit arrangements so the conference could begin. Connor smiled, saying it was quite an impressive piece of work. Soon, the students arrived at the conference. Connor greeted them, saying that today there would be an information conference on employment at the El Sung Group Company. He said that this was their second visit to their university. The last one was a year ago, and he had already seen familiar faces here. Kimberly asked those who were here last year to raise their hands. One of those who raised their hands was a student wearing glasses and a green t-shirt. Then the girl said that she remembered him and asked if he would like to apply to the company in the first half of the year. The guy didn't say that he applied but didn't pass the background check this year during the recruitment period. He wants to apply again. The girl said that the documents can be difficult the first time, but she wished him luck next time. Then Connor said that if they didn't pass the paperwork stage, then someone must have beaten them in additional skills points. Starting this year, the English test task will not be mandatory. These results will be taken as additional skills, and bonus points will be given for the test, so that everything is fair. Work experience, even if it is not related to their field, will also be an advantage. Therefore, it is important to track some points that will help with the collection of a sufficient number of analogs. Then the guy realized that he hadn't passed for this very reason. He needed to use at least some additional achievements. Oliver said that the seniors are quite experienced and they work really well as a team. When the conference was over, Connor said it was time for them to pack up their equipment and head back to the company. After that, the 4 of them went back to the office. Said that the manager wanted to entrust the conference to the newcomers this week. Kimberly was surprised. She thought it was too early for them to be given such a job. Connor said it looked like the manager wanted to test them in the conference room before moving forward, and the results would likely impact the assessment that would go to the strategic planning department. Then Tony said he would prepare everything for tomorrow, and Oliver said he would do the same. However, he was surprised that this test came upon them so suddenly. The next day, Tony went to the HR conference room. Jordan asked who wanted to go first. Then Connor said that Tony was younger than Oliver, so they should start with the younger ones. The hero was surprised. No matter how you look at it, being the first to speak doesn't give him any advantages. Then Oliver raised his hand, saying that he would like to begin. Tony was surprised by his initiative. At first, he thought he had misheard. As it turned out, Connor had said shortly before that he would make Tony speak first so that Oliver could prepare better. He said that in that case, the second one would have an advantage. He couldn't miss a person who took out a loan for education, because there are places where some people are simply not destined to be. Oliver remained silent. He did not know what to answer. As it turned out, Tony was eavesdropping on their conversation. Then Jordan said that they had an established order and that the older ones had to give way, so Oliver would speak now. Oliver said that in the second half of the year, 300 people will be hired to pass the document check first of all, of course. You need to prepare a resume, then additional points come. Kimberly noted that his presentation had a good start and that his breathing was stable. However, the presentation was a bit boring. Nothing caught his attention and his voice sounded quite monotonous. Apparently, Jordan noticed it too. He stopped Oliver saying that was enough and then said that it was Tony's turn now. The heroes stood up from their seats and introduced themselves. He said that before they got down to the main thing, he would like to pretend that those present in the office were students from the university they would visit next time. Jordan noted to himself that he had gotten off to a pretty good start. Tony then turned to the chart, saying that there was a reason their company was at the top of the rankings. He said that no other company can compare to their performance because they are, without exaggeration, the best in Korea. He then asked them to raise their hands if they were really interested in applying for a job at Elsung Group. Kimberly raised her hand, indicating she was interested. Then Tony turned to Oliver, saying that he should already be handing out the gifts that the company had prepared for the students. They wanted to give them to all the participants of the conference. Oliver looked surprised, asking if he really wanted him to do it right now. Jordan noted that it was a rather interesting way of presenting. Then Tony decided to tell them why they should choose their company. He said that in order to keep up with the era of globalization, the company focuses on 6 core projects. First, their electronics technology division is in the process of developing a new growth mechanism using OLED panels. Kimberly noted that he was doing very well. His speech made people want to apply by showing the future prospects of the company. Connor also noted his appealing voice action, which is focused on the facts, and he also worked on the visuals of the slides. Jordan thought this guy was doing a great job, even better than Connor and Kimberly's assistant. Then Connor suddenly stopped him, clarifying that Tony didn't speak English that well. Then he said that you can imagine that he is a foreigner and asks him something in English. Then he asked what Tony would do in such a situation. The hero did not lose his composure and again turned to Oliver for help. Oliver was surprised that they wanted to force him to do something again. He then asked him to come to Mr. Connor and explain the details of the hiring to him in English. Jordan was extremely pleased with this method of solving the problem. Kimberly laughed, noting how cleverly he had gotten out of the situation. Then Connor thought that the winner had apparently already been determined. Tony turned to the manager, asking if he should continue. Then Jordan said that was enough for today and thanked the guy for a great job. Soon, the university held another information conference on employment at the Elsung Group company. This time, Tony spoke and asked the students to take seats closer to him as the conference would start in 5 minutes. Connor noted that there were a lot of people gathered today. Donald said that the Elsung Group company is one of the largest companies in Korea, and of course, people are interested in hearing about it. When the conference started, Tony introduced himself by saying that he worked in the HR department and would be the moderator of the conference today. Donald was pleasantly surprised that this guy was in charge of the conference today. Then Connor explained that this was a new employee in their company. Donald said he seemed like a professional, so he wasn't surprised he was so kind and respectful that day. Connor said that this was not entirely true, since Tony did not graduate from a prestigious university and his knowledge of English was rather poor. He assumed that working in the company was not for him. However, Donald disagreed with him. He said that now the prestige of the university is not valued as highly as it was before. Rather, competent people are seen by how they are respected and recognized at such an age. Then Tony decided to start the conference by asking the students if anyone knew the 3 qualities the company was looking for in new employees. However, the students did not know the answer to this question. Tony then said that these qualities are enthusiasm, ethics, and innovative thinking. Their company is looking for people who will come to work with a sparkle in their eyes. They are looking for those who are not limited by the beliefs of the past, but can move the company into an innovative future. However, in the process of working with everything, you should not give up your values and principles, since these qualities are applicable to everyone present. Then one of the students raised his hand, intending to ask a question. Tony immediately gave him a chance to speak. The guy said he had heard that rural university graduates who applied to the company had failed the document check. He wanted to know if this was true, and if it wasn't, he wanted to know what the hiring conditions were. Tony didn't know how to answer this question since it was the first time he heard about it, and as for the hiring process for new employees, it is a blind check that does not take into account the focus of the university. He said that he studied through the academic credit banking system and was still hired. Hearing this, the students were delighted and decided that in this case they should also try to apply. Then another student decided to speak up. He said that he had been applying to the company for 3 years. Even though he had graduated, he still hadn't passed the paperwork check. He asked if they were really hiring blindly and how did they know they weren't lying. Oliver replied that this guy was communicating quite rudely. Then Tony said that it was true, and since this guy had been hanging around in the company for 3 years, it could be assumed that he was older than Tony himself. The hero said that at 20, he started working as a carpenter on a construction site. He said any work experience is important. It can be anything that shows the person has the qualities the company is looking for in employees. The student then said that he was preparing for employment, which is why he got a license. Tony said that in that case, he should spend his time usefully. The document check focuses on the life that candidates led before and which is described in the resume, and every second one has a license. Then the student asked what he should prepare in that case. Tony said that he needs to prepare a resume where he describes his lifestyle and the experiences he has gone through, as well as his personality, and the company will look at every detail of the resume. He said now is the time to ask yourself how you can show your strength to qualify. Then the student understood why he was rejected every time. He decided that he should review his resume and add a few points to it. Donald noted that the guy gave good advice because a resume is the first thing they look at during selection. Connor agreed with him, saying that it described the candidate's entire life. He remembered a situation that happened 4 months ago when he approached Kimberly and asked why she had put some of the questionnaires aside. The girl said that these forms contained information about Tony, codename SSS, which stands for the name of the vice president's son. Connor thought about the fact that this was probably why his resume was so interesting. It described how he got into the setup, worked there, described his values and beliefs. It all looked pretty decent. The girl said that on the other hand, the resume of that guy from abroad was just awful. There were monosyllabic sentences without any sincerity. Connor said it must be that SSS, he had a vision of the vice president raising his son in humble circumstances. Then he remembered the situation that happened 2 months ago. Connor asked the girl if the vice president's son wasn't in first place. Kimberly said it wasn't him. He was at the bottom of the list, and the one who wrote a good resume was at the top. Connor initially didn't believe that a guy with a credit-based education had made it to first place, but the girl suggested that he had a lot of work experience despite the fact that his education wasn't the best. Now Connor assumed that his opinion had changed to some extent. Donald asked him what he meant. Meanwhile, Tony continued the conference. He said that they accept people with experience, so it will be even easier to join the company, so they should not think of the newcomer program as the only option. He said there was little time left, so students needed to spend it usefully. One of the students said that he would think of it as his last chance and would consider other companies too. Tony chuckled and said that he shouldn't speak so openly about other companies, but he would pretend that he had never heard it. The guy awkwardly apologized for his words. Connor said that Tony was very competent and pleasant to talk to. Because of his education, he was biased towards him. Then Donald laughed, saying that he still had a lot to learn because education is far from being an indicator of the whole personality. Connor agreed with him, saying that after all, his life had just begun. After the conference, Oliver approached his partner asking how he was feeling because the guy turned out to be quite rude, but the hero said that he was fine, he was just tired. He said that he understood this guy. He said that he tried himself in the company for 3 whole years, and if Tony were in his place, his reaction to such words would be identical. Oliver said he wasn't that kind of guy, but Tony said he was actually desperate to get the job. He did physical labor, which was very difficult, plus his mother was sick. At that moment, Connor entered the room and asked if they were done with the conference. Then Tony said that that was all for today, and they should head to the next place. When everyone went outside, they said goodbye to Donald, and the man said that they should work in the same spirit since they did a great job. As they got into the car, Donald waved after them. He thought to himself that Connor was actually still a child. A few days later, Jordan was going through some paperwork. He consulted with the assistant manager about who should give the points to, Tony or Oliver. He couldn't decide because his opinion was quite relative. Connor said it was up to the manager. Then Jordan asked if he had recommended Oliver because he had studied abroad. Then Connor said that Tony should get a perfect score because he was better. Jordan said he was a very competent worker, but his education was not impressive. Then Connor said that they live in a time where it doesn't matter that much. He is smart and capable, and they should support him in this. Jordan agreed with him, saying that he thought exactly the same thing. 2 weeks have passed since then. One workday, Oliver approached Tony and asked what he was looking at. At this time, the hero was entering his data somewhere. He said he was going to check something. He was interested in the results of his English test. Oliver asked for age or number of points from last time. Tony said he scored 705 points. He studied the material for a whole month and was only able to score 180 extra points, and this result upset him very much. However, Oliver was shocked. He did not understand how a person could improve his results so much in just 1 month. At that moment, Connor entered the office. Noticing the strange expression on Tony's face, he asked what happened. Oliver then said that Tony had scored 705 in English and was unhappy that his score had gone up 180 points in a month. Connor chuckled, saying that it seemed like his limited knowledge of English wouldn't be a problem anymore. Tony said he was still not good enough, but he would try to work even harder. Then Connor approached him, asking him to stay with them in the HR department. However, he did not say that his goal was to join the strategic planning department. Connor said they were thinking about adding another person to their team, and the boss recommended him, and he agreed with him. Oliver was surprised to hear that there was a vacancy in the HR department, and he offered it to Tony. Connor said he can't say that HR is better than strategic planning, but they move up the career ladder faster than other departments, and they are sometimes called in for a meeting with the head of the company, which helps them keep track of their superior's work. However, Tony apologized, saying that he wanted to prioritize the strategic planning department, even if it meant losing his position in HR. Connor said he was sorry to hear that, but he didn't want to pressure him into making that decision, and asked if he was sure he wouldn't regret it later. Tony thanked the man for the offer, but he knew he couldn't accept it. Connor said it was okay, and if he didn't want to stay, then there was nothing he could do about it. Oliver was a little upset that Connor didn't offer him the position. Connor then returned to Jordan and informed him that Tony had rejected his offer. Jordan was surprised that he refused, despite his words that he would hire him. He said he had made the offer twice, but Tony was adamant about moving to the strategic planning department. Jordan said that they seemed to be the only ones who were paying attention to him. He didn't understand how someone with no knowledge of English could be so eager to plan. Then he asked Connor if he had turned him down before or after he found out that he needed to get at least a 700 on the business English exam. Connor sighed wearily and said that he had already received 705 points this month, so he didn't think they would be able to convince him otherwise. That same evening, the HR department decided to organize a team dinner. Jordan praised all of his employees, saying they had done a great job. He then turned to Tony, telling him he was very lucky because he had offered him a chance to stay in the department, but then reluctantly gave him a 5 and sent him on his way. Tony said he was sorry, but in the strategic planning department, he would be able to make full use of the skills he had acquired here. The manager then turned to Oliver and asked if he would be upset if he received a rating lower than Tony. Oliver said he wasn't upset, he knew he wasn't as good as him, so it was okay. Jordan said the score won't impact their overall performance rating, they're simply tracking the development of strategic planning candidates. However, Oliver did not understand what he meant. Kimberly explained that the manager was asking if he wanted to stay in HR because they wanted to know if Oliver would be willing to take over the position that Tony had turned down. At first, Oliver couldn't believe his ears. Tony thought to himself that this was a great decision since Oliver was eager to stay here. Jordan said that since Oliver was drunk now, they would continue the discussion tomorrow. He said that people could leave or stay if they wished. The main thing was to work hard wherever they were. He then decided to raise a toast to it and let go of all his worries. When the evening ended, Tony and Oliver went home together, Oliver offering his partner another drink. However, Tony insisted that he was drunk and should not drink anymore. And despite all Oliver's requests, he did not cave in and refused to drink with him again. Soon after, they decided to sit down and rest on a bench. Then Oliver said that he had something to tell him. Tony suggested that they talk tomorrow since Oliver was too drunk. However, Oliver ignored him, saying that sometimes he felt inferior compared to Tony. The hero asked why he felt this way since he studied abroad and had much better qualifications. Oliver then said that there was no point in that, since he was getting all the glory anyway, and he doubted that at this rate he would ever make it to the planning department. Then Tony suggested that they go home since Oliver could barely speak. Oliver said that he would stay in HR and would be promoted faster than Tony, but the hero did not understand what he meant by this. He asked Tony to give it his all so that he wouldn't have to swallow the dust that he would throw on him later. Since they joined at the same time, they would never stop competing, and it would be like that until he left this company. Hearing this, the hero smiled. He said that Oliver can do everything in his power, and he will also give his best wherever he goes, and then they will meet at the top of the business. They will try to rise to assistant managers and then directors, and then even executive directors. Oliver promised that he would never lose to him. Tony promised him the same. A few days later, Tony was invited to a conference in the strategic planning department room. Albert asked if all the candidates who applied for membership had come here. All 4 people said they were all there. Albert said that he heard that Oliver had decided to stay in HR, so another employee was joining them today, and the others should give him a warm welcome. Tony was very surprised when he heard this. At that moment, the office door opened and a young man walked inside. As it turned out, it was Tony, the president's grandson, who waved and greeted everyone present.